I'm so happy today to have mayoral candidate Keith Wilson here. Thanks for coming, Keith.
My pleasure, Andy.
You're the first mayoral candidate I've had on this show, so thanks,
You're
and
welcome.
I hope
Yeah.
to have more. And thanks, Kristen, for coming once
Thanks for
again.
asking me, Andy.
Check out Kristen's show, Rational in Portland, obviously, if you haven't listened to it. It's a great show if you like shows like this. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, so let's get started. I just wanted to know, like, with Renee and Mingus and Carmen running for the same spot, why did you jump in, and what are kind of the differences that you bring to the table?
You know, I really jumped in about 6 years ago, so it wasn't just a whim of a decision. So I run a very successful business in the Northwest. And in that, I started receiving National Innovator of the Year awards, some great success. And I've always loved Portland. I want this to be my home forever. And I always invested heavily into my home. And I started to see our city change. And I woke up one day and I literally drove into work and I didn't recognize the city that I grew up in. We had changed so much with livability issues and my neighbors angry and or tense and open drug use and crime being at levels that we had never experienced in Portland before. And so I started delving into the problems. Why is that? What's the root cause? Because I've been successful in my business building it, doing just that. Find the bottleneck, fix the bottleneck, then find the next one and keep going that virtuous cycle. And Portland was just on decline. So I started really just looking at the reasons, and I found it was mostly lack of leadership, failed policies that we kept trying to do over and over and over again. And in business, the thing you do is when you're failing, you don't keep walking down that same street. You change direction, you find a different method, you find a different way, but you fix it and then you improve it and then you move on to the next challenge. And we're not doing that in Portland.
Mm-hmm.
So while I'm not a current commissioner, and I know, like you had mentioned, Mingus, Renee, and Carmen are, we continue to do the same failed policies. And if we keep doing that, we're only going to continue to decline as a city. And I'd say a couple bullet points as far as numbers go. We have 4,000 people living on the street tonight.
Mm-hmm.
When I last ran for city council, which was 4 years ago, we had 2,000. And that year that I ran, I would always talk to people and say, we're going to have 90 people that are going to die this year. This was 4 years ago. This year, we're going to have 400 people die on the street. A lot of those are my high school classmates. They are my neighbors. They are people I know and I've grown up with. So it's time that we jump in and we actually come to talk to Portlanders about a change in what's going to happen tomorrow. So what you get from me is a complete 180. I'm an outsider, yes, but I'm experienced, educated, and I've operated at a high level. So I'm running because I'm not a failed leader. I'm not going to change and chase the same failed dogmas that we've been walking through trying to ban camping. Well, camping's illegal. Just care for the community and you don't have to have camping. And you can enforce your sanitation, your livability laws, right? So I keep seeing our decline year after year after year, and we have to stop that. And so that's what I'm focused on is really improving and helping everybody in the community. Yes, we're going to care for the unsheltered. We're going to shelter the unsheltered immediately. But what that brings is an immediate improvement in public safety because we're spending 50% of our time arresting the unsheltered, and they only represent 1% of our population. It means 99% of the population is going with degrading public safety. Police officers don't even show up anymore,
Mm-hmm.
right?
I'm curious, because and I have some questions about like how your kind of expediency and urgency with some of this stuff, and I'll get into that
You
later.
bet.
But you mentioned like you noticed this turning point. Do you remember exactly when that
Yeah.
was, like what year that was?
So Andy, so it was 2016 when the city and the county created what was called the Joint Office of Homeless
Oh yes, I
Services.
know the JOHS.
So let's do the numbers. We had 1,600 people unsheltered in the year that Joint Office was created. And it was great because, well, pardon me, poor choice of words. It was not great. The Joint Office, in a tremendous amount of fanfare, said, we're going to reduce unsheltered homelessness by 50%.
Mm-hmm.
And in that period of time, from then until now, it has gone up 136%. The Joint Office of Homeless Services did something that the nation was trying to do. They went and changed a mostly nighttime only sheltering system in Portland. They made it a 24-hour shelter system. So they tripled their cost almost overnight by
Mm,
going from overnight only to 24 hours. And they didn't even add one shelter bed.
mm.
And so here's what happened in 2016 and 2017 that our city leaders and our failed policies continue to focus on. We started closing shelters that wouldn't move to 24-hour. So we have a shelter that's empty right now downtown called the Salvation Army Female Emergency Shelter. The police really appreciated it because they would take domestic violence victims to that shelter. It's closed today.
Yeah.
We closed it 5 years ago in the middle of a public safety homelessness emergency declared by our city council.
We
We
closed that other
closed shelter.
Salvation Army on Burnside too.
Isn't
I mean,
just
we didn't close it. It just it was not equipped to deal with what our city's dealing with. I mean, it closed.
and it's empty tonight.
Mm-hmm.
I went down there and I visited because I'm trying to
And it was a
reopen it
great
for them.
place.
It was a great, and
Thank you.
the police appreciate it. So here's
Yes.
the thing: we had 2,500 people in shelter in 2017. We have 2,300 in shelter today. We've actually declined the amount of people in shelter today than we did in 7 years ago, despite having a joint office of homeless services budget of $250 million.
I know. And
It
our
is,
homelessness goes up
it
every
goes,
year
and it
in
goes,
our county, and it's going down in Washington and
yep.
Clackamas.
So is it because Portland has an affordability issue? No. There are other communities that have raised as far as yes, we have an affordability crisis. It's not the singular reason.
No,
We're
it's
not
not.
caring for our community. It's continuing to follow these failed policies where we're trying to house people. And I get it. We want to end homelessness, but we have got to end unsheltered homelessness first.
Yes.
And that's the problem is that, yes, I've seen communities and I've visited 30 communities around the nation who've ended unsheltered homelessness. Portland is trying to walk over the dollar to get to the nickel. We're trying to end homelessness, but yet our unsheltered homelessness has 4,000 people on the street.
Mm-hmm.
In
Mm-hmm.
fact, from 2022 to 2023, we added 800 people to unsheltered homelessness.
Yeah.
And yet our sheltering numbers go down.
Right.
And these numbers are the numbers that I see, that our community leaders see, that you see. Now, if you're not going to, and everybody says I'm data informed or I'm data driven, and I'm thinking, well, if you are, the numbers are absolutely going
Yeah,
the wrong
I
direction.
agree. I
That
agree
means
that
it's just failed leadership because it means that they're informed, but they're choosing not to act.
I'm trying to understand. That's their criticism of you? That you're
No, I
data
wouldn't say.
informed?
No,
Well,
I
I
wouldn't
think
say.
he's
They generally say I'm data
oh,
driven, and I
sure.
keep telling them, don't be data driven. These are people. Use it to
mm-hmm.
inform your decision. And then I go back and I've started really kind of pivoting my thought. And everybody says that it's financial capital we need to fix the problem. And I say it's social capital. We simply need to come together. Kristen, you asked me to come speak 6 or 7 months
Yeah.
ago. In that speaking engagement you invited me to, I met a person who heard that my main focus, we're going to end unsheltered homelessness, but I need day shelters and I need night shelters. She contacted me and I opened a shelter 4 weeks ago because of that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's like, it's not rocket science. Caring for your community should not be rocket science. Just use the assets you have, repurpose them at night, care for your community, end unsheltered homelessness, and then we can focus on ending homelessness. But we can't put the cart before the horse, and that's
Mm-hmm.
what we're doing. It's a very long answer for a very
No,
short
no, it's
question,
great.
but
Yeah, I like
I
it, man.
appreciate this forum to be more nuanced as to why are we in this situation, and it's all self-inflicted.
We're Yeah. putting the cart before the horse by building housing. Is that what you're saying?
It takes 5 to 10 years to build housing, and while
Yeah,
we're
and it's
building housing, what are we
astronomically
doing with our
expensive.
and
Mm-hmm.
the problem is because we're handing out tents, our
Yes.
city and our county is handing out tents saying, go wait on the corner in a tent in unsafe, dangerous, inhumane conditions while we try and build housing. And
I
the
think
rest
it's
of the
just the county,
nation,
but yes, they're handing it out.
my shelter, I got a call the other day. Do you want your order of tents?
The
And
city asked this?
the city can't, remember, it's the Joint Office of Homeless Services.
I know, but as my understanding is the city writes a blank check.
They write a
And the
blank check.
county decides it. So while the county is spending the money in some unfettered, unaccountable way, I mean, this is why Mingus Maps on City Council, Portland City Council voted no. And very bravely, I thought, to knock it off with the checks. We cannot give these people unaccountable money anymore and just be funneling it down a black hole. And he's exactly right. And I think, John DiLorenzo, who I think you know too,
I think to some
who
degree.
represented the disabled people in that Americans with Disability Act's lawsuit. He characterized the pinnacle of dysfunction, I thought, perfectly when he said, we are paying the county to hand out tents and we're paying the city to sweep them away.
My neighbor Elizabeth, she's addicted to fentanyl.
Oh, geez.
So her parents are friends of mine, and they let me use her name in the story. She lives in a tent next to the Greyhound shelter downtown
Wow.
tonight.
Yeah.
All right. So here's the worst part of it. Her dealer is in the next tent.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
She's addicted to fentanyl, so that's driving her behavior, her decision. She also has a bed at the Greyhound station shelter. She doesn't stay in it at night.
Right.
She uses it for food, for laundry, and for shower. The city will come by and sweep her tent away.
Yeah.
And guess what? The county's right behind handing out
Yeah.
another tent. It is the most
It's so
it's
crazy.
it's it's perverse support. So here's the root of that. I love Elizabeth. She's wonderful. I've seen her grow up from, age 5 to 30, and her 10-year-old daughter lives across the street now because she's in the
In a
tent.
tent?
No, her 10-year-old daughter lives with mom and dad,
I got it.
grandma and grandpa,
Yeah.
but Elizabeth lives downtown. So in this sort of perverse world, we hand her a tent, we sweep it, we hand her another tent, yet we give her a bed that's empty tonight that somebody could use for the whole
Mhm,
cycle. Do
mhm,
you see how we've created this cycle of an imperfect system
mhm, mhm.
because we're not providing basic shelter first? Do you see how we're
Yeah, yeah.
continuing that
So the
behavior?
Greyhound is not basic shelter?
The basic it is, but they're not asking her to be in the bed.
I
They're
see.
not
You're
doing
saying
a
take the tents away
yep,
and the shelter is the only option.
right. So if that's the case, but now we have improved our
Like New
livability in our
York actually
community.
does that. Yeah.
Yeah, what I
I mean, most functional cities,
Yeah,
as you know, because you've
yes. I
traveled.
was in Boise
Yes,
4
there you
weeks
go. All you
ago
do is
with
travel
I
and
was with
study this.
the former mayor of Boise. Have you heard of a law called Martin versus
Oh,
Boise?
Yes, of
yeah, yeah.
course.
So
The whole Ninth
go
Circuit,
talk
yeah.
to the mayor who actually was the
Right.
appellate on it, Dave Beater. I had lunch with him 4 weeks. He's on my leadership council. He ended unsheltered homelessness. So
Yeah.
I've been meeting with him for the last several years, and he gave me his plan. He says, "Here's how you do it. You care for your community. You don't not care for your community, and you don't hand out tents because it compromises the livability of
That's right.
everybody." And so we drive down the street now, and we're sick and tired of feeling sick and tired because we see dozens of tents on our route, and those people are suffering. So the way we stop that suffering is we end the unsheltered homelessness by caring for the shelters. But here's the critical thing, Kristen
Hmm.
and Andy. A third of everybody on our street is homeless upon arrival. They were homeless in a different
Yeah.
Yeah.
jurisdiction
I think,
and they
That's
chose
in
to
the
be
point in
homeless
time
here.
count.
The point in time,
you
that's
were just
exactly
talking about this
right.
on your show, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, it's just you can pull it up. It's the
you can pull
Multnomah
it up.
County
I think
point in time
The
actually,
count.
I think
numbers are there.
Vadim brought it up, I think, on your show.
It's
Yeah,
Yeah.
stunning
it is stunning. So,
because
so
it's
if we,
self-reported.
so if we provide basic shelter, so
We know
Mayor
it's more
Beater,
than that.
so let me kind of, so he lost that case in, may I kind of tell you about
Please,
the
Yeah,
law?
please.
yeah,
He
yeah.
lost that case in 2018. And I was talking about, and if you look at my Shelter Portland website, shelterportland.org,
Okay.
you'll see my plan to end unsheltered homelessness, and you'll see my 10-person national group of leaders on that.
When
But
you were mentioning one that somebody worked for Obama before we
yeah,
started. Yeah.
yeah, Mark Johnston is the Assistant Secretary to Reduce Homelessness for President Obama. He's on my team. So I have local, state, and federal officials on my team because they've all done this before. This is not something that hasn't been done. So I was talking to Dave. This was years ago. He's been helping me for years. But he said, Keith, here's what happened after I lost Martin versus Boise. I had 120 tents right next to City Hall.
Hmm.
Mm,
Sounds familiar, right? And so he came into City Hall. He called in his fire department, police department, homeless service providers, EMTs, had them around the conference table, and he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, what is going on? Why do we have these encampments in Boise? We've never had them before." "Mr. Mayor, we lost that court case." Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Around Portland, right?
Yeah.
He says, "Wait a second. We're not a camping community. We're a caring community. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to create mats and beds. You're going to find enough beds for each one of those individuals, and you're going to provide outreach for 30 days. I want to know every single person in that encampment. I want to know their stories." And so from day 30, day to zero, he counted down. And day 25 and day 20, outreach workers were gaining. "Hey, we're going to break camp. This is what's going to happen. We're going to care for you. We've got these shelters ready." And at day zero, they broke camp. And he said, "Here's what I learned, Keith." He said 40 of those individuals went outside of the region because they were from Cheyenne, from Portland, from
Yes.
Salt Lake City. He says the other 40 they were housed. They went back home. They doubled up. They were from the
mm,
housed community that came to the unhoused for whatever reason,
mm,
right?
mm.
He said, "I provided 40 shelter beds."
Yeah.
And he says, "Here's what I learned. I was completely wrong. I thought because I was going to be providing shelter, I thought I was going to draw people into my shelter system." He said it's completely the opposite. He says by not
Hmm.
applying your laws and by allowing camping, it does the opposite. It accelerates people into that lifestyle
Yeah.
behavior. Now, remember, of those 120 people, there's 120 stories.
Of
It
course.
might have been affordability for homes. It might have been addiction,
Or it might have
behavioral health.
started that way.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you know
yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, I think we know eventually it ends up being addiction and mental illness takes over, but yeah, it might have started with
There's
yeah.
affordability or
yeah.
depression or
He's like, Keith, you've got to end on shelter. So he says, if you have 4,000 souls on your street, he says, I guarantee you, Keith, as soon as you set up the 4,000 beds immediately, he said, I'd be surprised within a few months, you'll be right back at 1,000 or 1,300 because the individuals who've arrived at Portland will, for whatever reason, either accept shelter, which we want. I mean, we need help as far as our workforce. We want to help
yes.
these individuals. We don't want people living and dying on the street. But it's compromising the livability for every Portlander.
Hmm.
Our
Hmm.
public safety system is compromised. So remember I told you at the beginning of the show, half of all arrests last year were of the unsheltered.
Uh-huh.
And it was so police response times a decade ago. If you were in your worst time of need, Kristen or Andy, somebody was holding you up or breaking into your house, you could call, they'd be there in 6 minutes on average. Today, it's 24 minutes.
At least.
And so here's what we do. We get to improve everybody's public safety in Portland. We get to reduce our overloaded police officers and firefighters because they're not going to always be responding to an unsheltered thing or arresting somebody. And I ride with them a lot. And that's every time I've done a ride along with officers, we've only arrested unsheltered souls. It
Hmm.
is. One guy we arrested, it was his 9th time in 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
That takes that. And what officer wants to join the Portland Police Force and say, oh, by the way, come and join our Portland Police, and you're going to be arresting the unsheltered persons for half
Right,
of your
right.
time. What sort of dignity-based job are we really offering to our community? So I simply say, we end unsheltered homelessness. We right that ship, we care for everybody in the community, and we restore livability. We repair, restore, and revitalize our city. And we can do it quickly and at extremely low cost. And I hope we can talk about the costing because
Yeah, we can
that's why
talk.
I've been opening shelters. I want to know what's it
Yeah,
going to cost,
yeah, we can
right?
talk more about.
It's
Yeah,
not
What's
financial
wrong with this
capital.
city? Because I agree with you. If there's an ice storm, we see this all the time in the
Yes,
Pacific
Kristen.
Northwest. If there's an ice storm, we open shelters,
Yep.
warming shelters, it's seemingly within 10 seconds.
hmm,
Yep.
But when, Martin versus Boise comes down, the way I read it, it doesn't say you can't ban sidewalk sleeping or sleeping on the side of the road. The way I read it, it says you can't do that unless you have somewhere for them to go. So, like you said, is that your understanding based
That's
on your
it.
conversation with the
Yeah.
mayor? I don't understand why this won't doesn't sink in here. Maybe it does and they have some secret plan I don't know about.
No.
Why wouldn't we just open up, do what we do with these warming shelters and just do pop these things open? I mean, they really do. They do it throughout the city
Andy? Yeah.
almost immediately.
I think we have a new mayoral candidate in Kristen, by the way. Kristen,
I wish Kirsten
Kristen,
would
I
run
will tell
for
you what, it
something.
is that basic. It's
I
again,
wish you would too.
it is
Maybe
that
we do it
basic.
together.
So I'm going to use the example you just gave. So we have 4,000 people living on the street, and we opened up warming shelters. And do you guys recall how many beds we provided?
Well, I just remember it was a big scandal because Jessica
The
Vega
storm.
Peterson, the chair, like closed them early or
There
something.
Well,
was a temperature threshold,
that's
Right,
right.
that's
and they
right. And she kicked them all
closed.
out when it was still
Yeah,
freezing cold. But
Right.
yes, it was instant, and I don't remember how many, but it
A
was a
third.
lot.
Remember, it was 1,300
Yeah,
souls
it
we
was a lot.
provided. Yeah, but remember the numbers that I told you about Mayor Beater in Boise?
mhm.
He said a third accepted. So
Sure,
we
that's
had
exactly right.
4,000 and we provided 1,300 emergency beds. And when I saw that story come out, I thought, holy cow, that's exactly what Mayor Beater had said it was going to happen. Just go and talk to people who've been successful in their communities. And I fear Portland is insulated. We're trying to do this on our own.
Right.
Right? And we're failing as we're trying to do it on our own, yet the answers have been there for hundreds of years. In an
Yeah.
emergency, in an earthquake, in any
Yeah,
sort of
I
natural
know.
disaster, severe winter shelter, we simply care for our community.
It's
We
never
we
been an
we
issue.
rapidly and flexibly stand it up,
Mhm.
and when the disaster abates, you start caring for the communities and you provide the services, the
Yeah.
linkage to housing or whatever the case may be, and then you flex down. But you don't build shelters that take 5 years and $37 million to build
Right.
a structure when you want that to be temporary. We don't want it to be a system or systemic or where it just always is part of it. We want
Yeah.
to end unsheltered homelessness so then we can move on to ending homelessness. But
Here's I had this question pop in my head this weekend when I was thinking about all this stuff. Um, because I agree with you. I think the second piece of that is kind of maybe more important, the linking them to permanent
I
housing
love
or
that.
addiction treatment or whatever, because I don't know if you've seen like this. I know Denver was one of the cities that this happened with, but they'll use hotels as shelter,
Right.
and
And
then
they
they
die
have this
indoors.
crazy spike in 911
Oh,
calls and
yeah.
other problems from these hotels because they're basically just unmonitored
Yes, they're
people.
24-hour hotels. They're very expensive.
And so I was just
Uh,
curious, like, what, like, does that
That's
just
a
so
put
good
so
more
so
question.
no,
emphasis
it's a,
on
I
the?
I know your question. I'm going to answer, and I think I know what you mean. So the nighttime shelter. So think of what I'm doing as the five S's.
Mhm.
Okay, the five S's. So nighttime emergency shelters. They're walk-in. We won't turn anybody away,
Right,
right?
walk in,
Because
leave.
if we turn somebody away, it means they can go camp, and if they can camp, then the Martin versus Boise ruling kicks
Right.
in.
Right.
We must have enough and a level for every single person that needs it. So the nighttime emergency shelter covers safety and security.
Mhm.
Okay.
Absolutely critical,
Right.
especially if you're a woman. It
Mhm.
covers shelter and sleep. Those are the four basic needs you have to survive through
Yes,
the night.
that's right.
Now, the fifth S is services, right? How do
Right.
we
Right.
link them? So that's why I've started opening day shelters. Kristen, that relationship with the after the presentation to your group, she called me up and said, "Hey, I've got this empty facility on Southeast 82nd Avenue. It's the Episcopal Church there. It's empty. Would you like it?" And I said, absolutely. So I already know the costing of a nighttime shelter. I know how much it costs to operate a nighttime shelter, and it's at 8% of what the city is sheltering
Hmm.
people for.
Hmm.
All right, so I know that. My team's already set up. Union Gospel Mission is staffing it. It's at the Church of
That's
Nazarene, the structure,
fabulous.
and then I provide financial assistance through Shelter Portland, right, to them.
Mhm.
And it works. And we're sheltering people at $15.55 per person per night.
Isn't that
A Safe
amazing?
Rest Village is
Oh, I know.
I
$189.
know. I love that you have the cost for these too,
You
by the way.
have to
Yeah.
because we're going to do this quickly within months. I need to
Yeah.
know every part of it. So I opened a day shelter because I realized I need to know what do we do during the day, the
Right.
services. And so we opened a day shelter, and that is the linkage. And at the day shelter, we find out what their need is, what's keeping them from housing. It could be eviction, it could be
Mhm.
misdemeanors and fines and fees, and we start to reduce those barriers. It could be domestic violence, PTSD,
Mhm.
AA or NA. We start linking them with those services,
Reunite with
food,
family members,
and
community. Yeah.
Kristen, do you know I was in Phoenix working with their homeless service campus? They have one very large campus for homeless, and they do what's called coordinated entry. Every time you walk in, they ask 10 questions. And the first question is, can we reconnect you with your family or friends?
Mm.
Yeah.
Because you can't
Should be the
readily
first
camp.
question.
And you know what? They have 10% effectiveness.
That's
I'm
pretty.
sure they
Yeah.
10%
do.
of the people that walk in say yes, and they immediately have a triage team that go in and call their families, and they'll hook them up with a bus ride. Now,
Yeah.
when you let people live on the street in Portland, you're removing that
Yes.
ability to connect somebody with their
Yes.
social network because when you're on your street, you're at your rock bottom.
Right.
It is dangerous. It is unhealthy and often tied to addiction. We want to help those individuals out, but it always comes back to the housed. When we let people live on the street, people start moving out of our community.
Mm-hmm.
We've lost 19,000 people in the last 4 years. Our downtown core vacancy rate
Oh,
is at
60%.
30%. We are the highest vacancy rate in the nation.
I thought it was like 60.
It's 30% today, but it's expected to go to
I got it.
40% next year. We
Okay.
have empty buildings downtown,
Mhm.
and nobody wants to go downtown because it's not livable or
Yeah.
safe. So we have the best city in the world, absolutely bar none. I've traveled, I've lived overseas, but we're not treating it like the resource, like the special place it is, and we're not caring for our
Yeah.
community.
I was just gonna feel free to like agree or disagree with this, but from my interpretation of what you're saying is permanent long-term housing first is not the solution, but sheltering
Mm.
people is the solution.
Yes, but
Is
it's a continuum. You
immediate
must
solution.
Along with
not have people
reconnecting
living on the
them.
Yeah,
street.
because
Yeah.
I
Let's
agree with
so the
that.
continue
Yeah.
yeah, so I will tell you the continuum says, but we've it's the cart before the horse. We cannot have people living and dying on the street. First and foremost, we must triage, fix that,
Yeah.
care for our neighbors immediately. Then once they're in shelter, sure, housing first
Right,
works
right.
really
That's
well. I've been to
then you have that conversation at that
yeah.
point. Yeah.
So there are 3 communities that have ended homelessness.
Mhm.
It's Bergen, it's Rockford, Illinois, and it's Gulfport, Mississippi. And I've been to all 3 of them, and I've
Okay.
worked with them. They use what's called Built for Zero,
Mm-hmm.
but the first thing they did was they ended unsheltered homelessness, and now they were able to end homelessness.
Okay.
Do you understand? You can
Yeah.
achieve this. You can end homelessness, but we got to recognize you cannot have anybody, not a single soul living on the street. I get it. In Boise, there's 115 unsheltered, and they're usually suffering from behavioral health issues, right? But what they've ended is tent encampments, makeshift shelters, no RVs, no cars, no vans that have
Mhm.
their stuff flowing out of it, right? Inoperable, unsafe, unsanitary. Unsheltered homelessness, be aware, it's all those things that are that we have sanitation laws for. We
Right.
have to be able to enforce our codes
Right.
for the entire community. And the last thing I want to say, when you don't enforce your codes for the unsheltered, then the housed start taking advantage of your community. The graffiti,
Oh, yeah.
the
Mm.
We
trash,
see that
the illegal
everywhere.
dumping. I go out and I
No
do,
license plates.
right, Andy, you know I own a trucking company, so I volunteer for Solve. I'll bring a truck and I'll fill it up with garbage. And I will tell you, when I load up a half a load of drywall because a contractor didn't want to go dump it
Yeah.
and spend the $300 because they could just do it.
Yeah.
It shows you when you don't care for your unhoused, the housed, some people start taking advantage of your city. And look at our graffiti, the trash. We can't keep up with that because we're just trying to clean up and moving and sweeping unfortunate souls
Mhm.
that are in encampments. So
Mhm.
stop the encampment. Stop it now. Care
Yeah.
for your community.
I'm curious,
That's
like,
great.
yeah, like I like how maybe it's your business acumen or something, but I like how you've have a lot of this stuff that's like tracked and you have prices
Absolutely.
and stuff for this. I'm curious, like, if you were elected mayor, what you would try to do. Because in my mind, like the JOHS doesn't do any of that stuff.
Right.
Like they
No,
don't, they're
Right.
very bad at
we don't know
that.
what they're
It's
doing,
but
and they won't tell us.
And I'm curious,
yeah.
like, what would you do to improve that?
It's a great
You know?
question.
Well, JOH, I mean, again, we
Stop
can
giving them
focus
money.
on ending homelessness. We are the most over-resourced county
That's
in the
exactly
nation,
right.
right?
Mhm, mhm.
So it's not a money issue.
Right. The county has a lot
No.
of
It is a
money.
leadership,
Yeah.
execution, failed policy issue. So let's talk about the county just for a second. So they have an awful lot of resources, but their focus is healthcare and human services.
Mhm,
We're asking for them to be a infrastructure company, right?
mhm,
Keep in mind, as
I
mayor,
see.
I'm in charge of three things as far as the city goes. I'm in charge of public safety, the right of way, the streets, and infrastructure. So sheltering my community members is in my purview. I should be doing that.
Hmm.
We're asking the county to do something they've never been good at, or they haven't. I mean, they own what, maybe 200 miles of roads. That's it.
But
yeah.
why can't they build out the infrastructure that you would need, Keith, like rehabs and detoxes? Now that would be in their
That's
purview, wouldn't it?
absolutely. So, Andy, you talked about the services part of it. Remember, I talked to you about the
Yeah.
safety,
Mhm.
security, shelter, and sleep.
The
That's the
S's.
nighttime shelters.
Yeah.
I can do that overnight as mayor. But that fifth S, that's all about county. It's services, right? It's the behavioral health issues. It's the addiction.
Yeah.
They can tie into the day shelters. In fact, here's my budget. I've been working on a budget to end unsheltered homelessness. Super low cost. It's like $20 million. It's a it and that's it because I'm not building any structures. I'm just using churches and community centers. And at $15 times 4,000,
Existing
do the
stuff.
math. It's
Yeah.
super. Now I want county to come in and work the day shelters. They would feel comfortable because they don't want to have shelters. They don't feel it's in their
Yeah. It's
purview.
an
They
ideological
want to do
thing or something. Yeah.
exactly. So I
Mm,
just simply
mhm.
work with their strength. So I'll ask Chair Vega Peterson to partner with me. Help me with the day shelters. Bring in your outreach workers. Bring in your human and health services. Work on detox. Work on behavioral health. It's what they do, and they do well.
Do
So
they?
yeah, they really do.
But
That
we don't have any rehab or
Kristen,
detox.
as a city, we're asking them to do our job.
Okay, you're saying you will build the rehab and
I'll take care of the
infrastructure?
nighttime emergency shelters. I will
Uh-huh.
care for the unsheltered immediately. I want county to really help me with the day shelters, to link them with the human services that county, the behavioral
But
health,
we don't
the
have the
addiction.
human services. Like we
We don't,
have what, 3
but that,
detoxes?
oh, and those are generally funded through the county.
Right.
We want them to do that.
Right.
Right.
So are you saying, I mean, will you condition the city's money on them doing things like that?
Not with 400 people. I won't condition anything. I will care for, if the county's with me, wonderful. If they're not, we're
They
going to,
won't be with you.
Kristen,
I mean, if they could open up rehabs and detoxes, they could do it. They have the money to do it.
now, I think we're confusing just caring and ending unsheltered homelessness
Yes.
with the behavioral health side of it.
The services.
I do believe they are working hard and fast at doing that. And because we're going to lower the cost for sheltering,
How long
there's going to
does
be
it
so much.
take? I mean,
No, so you're talking about the sobering centers and things like that, that they are woefully behind on. I agree. That's just ineffective
how many
leadership.
people do we have to die before
I
one of these
agree.
gets set up?
You know
When
what?
I,
I'm
I
not
always,
gonna. I understand your point. I'm as frustrated as you are. I just need to know that what I can control,
I
Kristen, is
understand.
I can end unsheltered homelessness. I
But I
can't
think you
do
can help
their.
bring the county along. I really do. I think
I
by
agree.
your leadership,
I
you can
agree.
say things like, I am really inviting them to join me because
Yes,
see what
that's
I've done
exactly
and
right.
see how effective it is, and then hopefully there will be some public pressure to follow along.
Kristen, so I am friends and I respect Chair Vega Peterson. When I've needed things and I've called her, she's quickly shown up. And when she's asked for things from me, I've quickly shown up. I trust her and I know she trusts me. It's a good relationship to start with.
Good.
To your point
I
right
hope
there
she
about if
listens.
she sees that we're going to care for Portlanders and she sees that we're caring for Portlanders and we're not just saying, you should take care of this, Jessica, this is your job, and just pointing the finger, I'm not going to be pointing fingers. I'm going to be asking for collaboration from her. But on January 1st, we're not waiting for anybody. We have 4,000 people living on the street. That
Yeah,
has to
you
come
just
to an
have
end
to do what you can
immediately.
do.
And I can do it low cost as a disaster. And I guarantee you the county commissioners will be with it. Julia Brim Edwards is
Oh, well, of
brilliant.
course she will.
Sharon Myron is so passionate and
Hmm.
so ready.
Of course she
Lori
will.
Stegman is a good friend and has always been there for me. I don't know Mr. Beeson. He's brand new. But they are sharp people and they want to care for our community. But we need leadership at the city. Let's not try and deflect our leadership responsibilities over to the county. You're going to hear all the other commissioners say they should spend their money more wisely. No, we should manage our city to care for our citizens. I'm not asking to be the mayor of Multnomah County. I'm asking to be the mayor of the city of Portland. That's my job. My job is public safety, and I'm going to care for everybody. By ending unsheltered homelessness, I'm caring for the police department. I'm caring for firefighters. I rode with firefighters the other day.
Oh,
There was
well,
so much. I had a team of 4. I rode with them all day, and I went through my Shelter Portland plan to end shelter homelessness. One guy turned to me and says, "Keith, I've lost my purpose. I don't know what I'm doing here.
yeah.
I'm doing 10 overdose reversals per
Yes.
day.
Yeah.
I didn't sign on to do that." And he said, "My job used to be an A. I've been with the fire bureau for 20 years. My job used to be an A. I used to love to come to work." He
Right.
says, "Keith, now it's a D on the best day."
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's police and fire both, and I think that's why they're both have such low morale. And I don't know
That's
about the
right, Andy.
firefighters numbers, but the police certainly are very low staffing
They're
numbers.
both, yeah, really
Yeah.
hurting the police, especially. You're
Our
right. And your episode with Aaron Schmaltz was everybody needs to watch that. Everyone. I'm with your permission, I'd like to put like some clips on Twitter or something because it was
Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
so good.
Yeah.
And he really explained all of it, I felt like.
Hmm.
The why we have so few police and why public safety is just out of control.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't know.
Thank you for
I
doing
bring
that.
up all the county stuff because it's
yeah.
just I see that connection is broken between the city
It
and the
is
county,
broken.
So you
and
fix it.
obviously it's a joint. The
Yeah,
homelessness is a joint office, or it's
right.
supposed to be, but
Yeah. You fix it by trusting them. You don't push them away. You
mhm.
ask them to come to the table. But
How do
we
you
keep
trust
asking
them?
them for money, though. Here's the thing. We keep making this a money thing. We're going to give
Yeah.
you
Well,
all this millions of dollars. I need you to go solve it. But yet we don't do anything.
yeah,
Portland should
yeah.
not and county should not be handing out tents. Our homeless shelters in downtown Portland should not be handing out tents. We should be handing out basic life-saving
I agree.
shelter.
But
Yeah.
Keith, I don't think we can keep writing checks and allow it to disappear into a black hole. I would like some data from the county, and we don't have it. And it's very puzzling to me.
So, Kristen,
Yeah.
our commissioners right now are getting ready to sign on to a 3-year intergovernmental agreement and sending those checks to county. But what sort of outcomes are we going to get for that money? We're not holding them accountable.
I
And
know.
I've talked
It's
to all our
very
commissioners.
troubling.
I said, don't sign that. I said, okay, I understand, ladies and gentlemen. I've talked to our commissioners and said, don't sign that, please. I appeal to you because as mayor, or you're, if Renee's mayor or Mingus, I've appealed to them. Don't sign it. I said, okay, and if you do, put a conditional
Yes,
that what are your metrics you're going to hit?
that's right.
I run a business
Yeah.
and I have every job and every position developed through what are called KPIs, key performance
Yeah. Yeah.
indicators. I get what's called red green indicators. And every Friday when I walk into my executive committee meeting, my executives come to me and they'll present, and we have a large list of a dashboard. I expect everything to be green. If it's green, we're in tolerance, and I set far reaching yet achievable goals. If
Yeah.
it turns red, I'm okay with it if it's red for a week. I'm okay if it's red for 2 weeks, but I want to understand what's the root cause and what are you doing to fix it? How do we get back in
I'm
compliance?
I'm familiar with KPIs, and I just feel
Yeah,
like that's like the total opposite of what you
that
see
Yes,
at the
Andy,
county right
the
now.
right,
total
But we
opposite.
do
right.
need trackable metrics, especially from them.
So all I ask is that we're getting ready to sign a 3-year contract, and I'm just thinking it
No,
makes no sense with the outcomes. We added like 900 people to unsheltered homelessness last year, and we're getting ready to sign a 3-year agreement saying that we trust what you're doing,
no.
that the
Mm, mm,
metrics are
mm,
meeting our minimum requirement. I said,
mm.
then at least make it a 1 year. or a 2-year at most,
Oh,
but
3
sign it.
months.
But can we wait another 3 in Portland? Can we
No,
wait
we
another
can't.
3 years
Let's
without
treat this like the
action?
emergency it is. I'm so sick of hearing about fentanyl emergencies in meetings.
I so Kristen, I so ladies and gentlemen, my name is Keith Wilson. I'm running for the city of mayor. And in the first year of my being mayor, we're gonna end unsheltered homelessness. So that's the message I'm trying to repeat,
Yeah.
repeat.
No
And you
more
know what?
meetings.
Do you think I can do it?
Yeah, well, let's get into that because I wrote down ending homelessness 1 year. Make me believe that. I wrote
Okay.
that.
So it's that
I
one
like the plan
year
you
isn't
outlined.
yeah, so it started 6 years ago, and I told you my genesis. So I started befriending everybody around the nation and the world. I've traveled to refugee camps in
Yeah, you
Greece
have.
because I
I've
want to know
seen the
how do you do
pictures.
that?
And yeah.
And if you go to my Facebook or LinkedIn, because I've educated everybody. And about a year and a half ago, that's it. We set up a group called Shelter Portland, and we
Mm,
started developing plans here. I started creating my own shelters and sleeping in parking garages. I've
Yeah.
started sleeping in shelters to test, and I put
I
it on
forgot about that.
Facebook.
Yeah, you did.
Right. I
you
mean,
actually were sleeping in them? Is that
yeah,
what
well,
you?
check this
Yes.
out.
Okay.
So who's getting harmed by unsheltered homelessness? Does anybody ride public transport anymore?
No.
Yeah,
Right.
it's
Their
all
numbers are
safety
plummeting.
issues
Right,
and
we do
yeah.
that.
So I called Doug Kelsey and Sam Dessou, the general manager and the chief operating officer for TriMet. And I said, hey guys, there's a fella, a friend in Brisbane, Australia, who's repurposing parking structures at night into shelters. Let's try it here. And you know what Doug Kelsey said, the general manager? What a crazy call to get, right? He said, let's do it. And I went, oh my God, because everybody's just so ready for an idea, a solution.
Yeah,
Stop doing the same
that's
failed
right.
things over and over. So I set up a shelter in the Gateway TriMet parking garage
Mhm.
because it's ringed by 100 tents and
Yeah.
the multi-use path. If you go down it, if
Oh,
you're a woman, a one woman who
oh
said I
no.
used to ride to the Gateway parking garage and then take it into work. She says I don't do it. I drive.
Well, I used to ride the spring water. I drive. I haven't ridden
Yes.
my bike in years, and I won't do it.
So they let me set up a shelter, and I said it worked. And so I worked with George Devendorf and Mark Jolan. George Devendorf is our executive director at the time at Transition Projects, our largest homeless sheltering system.
Mm.
Mark Jolan was
TPI, they
the,
call it.
yeah,
Yeah.
DPI.
Yeah.
And then Mark Jolan was our
Head
director of
of
the Joint Office
joint
of Homeless
office, yeah.
Services. I said, hey guys, this worked. Let's try it in a different facility. We set it up on the coldest day of the year at the Metro parking garage,
Okay.
and that was on a severe winter shelter
That's
night.
right. I think you and I talked on the phone about this, and that I was not impressed with Mark Jolin's job overall at JOHS, but I was impressed with what you told me about the way the two of you worked
Yep.
together and the things that he did with you, which I didn't know
Mar-
about. But it sounds
yeah.
like anytime you called him, he was right there
He
to
wants to try.
assist.
He wanted to find different ways, Kristen. I applaud Mark for that. Now, we kept trying to do the housing first, build housing, but we weren't watching the unsheltered
A
rate
lot of that
incline.
was his
So,
boss,
but
the chair at the time.
that's
In my
it's a
opinion. In
leadership
my
issue.
opinion.
Yeah. So I opened up that shelter and it was 20 degrees out. I had 8 volunteers there. And this was done through the joint office. They set it all up, but I volunteered there. We had 8 volunteers there. We had 30 people sleeping inside, and I almost killed 8 people because it was so cold. And
That is
we
pretty cold.
piped
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
propane. Well, it didn't work. You couldn't repurpose it quickly and then move it back to its
Mm,
parking
mm,
structure that next
okay.
morning. So in Brisbane, my friend Norm McGilvery, who had the idea, well, in Brisbane,
It's it's
it's
warm
temperate.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's 70 degrees. And I said, Norm, it's not going to work. So I started checking with friends who had churches. And I said, Matt Huff, who's a friend of mine, he was an advocate for a group that advocates for sheltering people immediately. I said, hey, let's borrow your church. Move the pews away. I brought in unsheltered souls because I need advice because I'm not unsheltered. I brought in homeless people to spend the night with me. And I started peppering them with questions and what will work, what won't work. And from a granular standpoint, I brought in air mattresses because that's what Norm did at Brisbane in
Mm,
Australia at the
Mm,
parking
mm,
air mattresses. So I brought up
why
air
not?
mattress. Sounds great, right? So when I asked the unsheltered people, do you think they liked it? They didn't. And I
mm.
went, why? They said, I'm used to sleeping on the ground. So there's your epiphany.
Hmm.
Don't assume you know the answers until you ask
That's a great
somebody with
point.
lived experience. So I thought mats were going to be inhumane. No, they actually
That's
are
a great point.
welcome.
And
And
less
so,
expensive.
yeah. And so Union Gospel Mission opened up the shelter. They fund it. And Church of Nazarene, it's their structure. And then I came on board last year and started providing financial assistance. And that's how I learned about the budget. $15.55 per night. So that's how it came about. And then I've started Shelter Portland as that vehicle to educate Portland. We can do it. Stop overthinking this, everybody. We need
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
act. So how am I going to end unsheltered homelessness in 12 months? On November 6th, my team is going to kick in.
Two
Those
two
10.
days after my birthday, by the way.
Well, the election, happy birthday, happy
On
early
the
birthday.
November
So
4th.
on
Yeah.
on November 5th is the election. On November 6th, we're not going to celebrate. I'm bringing my team together, and for 2 months, we're going to start building that plan because I'll be in a shadow government at that point.
Right.
On January 1st, I'm going to bring council together. Our first 12 members, the first things that they're going to be focused on is they're going to be asked to agree to a public safety emergency. Public safety, not a homeless emergency.
Okay.
When you have 4,000 people as an earthquake just hit, just imagine that. It's a public safety emergency, and for
Right.
90 days, we're going to set up the system. And on April 1st, I'm going to take all of my homeless service provider executive directors that are on my Shelter Portland team. I have 5 of them. They lead Portland already, and we're already working on the pro forma. They already know what to do. We're then going to stand up 12, 14, 16, 18 nighttime emergency walk-in shelters on April 1st. And within 90 days, we'll communicate to the community unsheltered homelessness is coming to an end. If you're in a tent, here's your notice. If you're in an RV that's registered 2012
Mm.
with a Florida plate, heads up, you can't create that as a primary residence anymore. They call that because you can't provide shelter. If you're in an RV, it's considered your primary residence. Well, if it's unregistered,
Yeah. No.
unlicensed, and uninsured, it's against our laws.
Mm.
So I'll give them a notice of 90 days. Hey, heads up. This is your chance to get that vehicle
Yeah, it's a pretty
operational, or
large
it's going to
window
be.
of
And then
time.
you'll
Yeah.
actually tow it, because that's the other thing is like you go down Delta Park and there's sticker after sticker after
Yeah,
sticker.
there's
And
actually there's been one growing on 92nd up here that
So
they just kind of move
Andy,
around, but
you as a neighbor, you need to be helping that person. You're going to call Peabot and say, "Hey, I've got an unregistered
RV or whatever.
inoperable RV,"
Yeah.
and then we post it and we say it's going. Now, it's if that car and moves to a different location, we need to. The way we end it is going to have to be impounded because if you're not, by the
yeah,
way,
that's
by
right.
law in Portland, if you have an uninsured vehicle, you're not allowed to operate. So it's
No.
immediately
Yeah.
impounded, and it has to be.
I was curious too, does the emergency declaration, does that give you state funding or federal funding or
No,
something? Or?
but on my team is Maxine Dexter,
Okay.
Dr. Maxine Dexter. She's the chair of the Homelessness Committee for the Oregon State Legislature.
Okay.
She's one of my 10 leadership. She's my pipeline to the governor. The governor wants us to care for Portlanders because
Well, yeah.
Portland's fate
Hmm.
dictates the fate of Oregon. If Portland's failing, Oregon's
That's
failing
exactly
because
right.
Yeah.
we're that shiny
I,
city
I
Revitalized
on the
city.
and I
hill,
know she
guys.
was part of the downtown
Yeah,
revitalization
she
thing
will
or
be
whatever.
with
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
I spoke to Speaker Fahey last week, and I said, Speaker Fahey, um, of the House, I said, I'm going to need help. I want you to reflect on it. She, well, people have been asking for funding for addressing unsheltered, but they haven't come and said, what's the outcome going to come from it? So I said, well, reflect on it this next 6, 7 months. What we can do from a state. What can you help us with in City of Portland? So I have everybody ready to go. I have an upcoming meeting with a HUD official, our local
Mm.
HUD official, through Mark Johnston, who was the Assistant Secretary for President Bond. He's connected me with federal officials. What can they do to help? Because there's so many people that want to help. We have to connect and collaborate and bring those team members together, but act. But we're not going to wait, Andy. We're not waiting for anybody. I want county to be with me, and I know they will be. I want state to be with me, and I know they will be. And the same with the federal government. I know people want this. They want to care for their community. But every housed person will immediately be made whole because we will have our dignity brought back to us. We'll feel good about our community again.
Yeah, I was curious. This is kind of like, I mean, it's sort of related to that, but I'm curious. What do you think of what the governor's been doing with these cutting off the bottle drop, like the downtown Safeway and that stuff? I'm just,
It's a half measure, Andy. So
yeah,
I've got my
it's a
day
band aid.
It's
shelter.
increasing crime.
Well, I also heard it just shifted to
That's right.
other
And
locations,
I'll
and
tell you what happened. So my day shelter's on Southeast 82nd Avenue. As soon as I opened, I created a safety zone because I want to care for the community. And so if you're
Mm.
living unsheltered in my safety zone, a 15-block area around the day shelter, after a certain amount of time, like 7 days, my operator, PDX Saints Love, will work with you. Come in, come in. We want to help you, but you can't live in the community. You cannot live next door in a tent because it's affecting the neighbors then.
Mm.
So as soon as we opened the shelter 4 weeks ago, we did the fentanyl reset downtown,
okay,
and
yeah,
they
yeah.
all moved out to Northwest Portland, North Portland, and now I had a 12-person tent encampment on 82nd Avenue, our
Mm,
marquee street,
mm.
right across from my day shelter. So
I,
what happened?
yeah,
It's a half measure.
yeah.
We simply moved it away from the downtown area where it was visible, and we moved it over to East County where those individuals have less of a say. They have less of a voice. We didn't fix anything.
Well,
Mhm.
no, because we didn't fix drug addiction. I mean, they're
No,
just and they're
yeah,
just doing other things for money, which
It
are harming the community and
it just gives the
criminal.
Safeway and the Plaid Pantry like a break for a minute.
that's
That's
right.
pretty much
I
all.
don't know that it gives them a
Or
break
maybe it
because I
doesn't. I
think
don't
they're
know.
shoplifting. I
Yeah.
think they're
Well,
assaulting. I think
Yeah.
they're,
Yeah, that
I mean,
Safeway's always
I'm
had
right
problems.
by that scary Safeway.
Yeah.
I do not stay in my office. I was just talking to, I'm trying to renegotiate with my landlord. And I was talking to them about how I cannot stay, forget dark, dusk.
that's
Yeah.
right.
Well, they were.
Dusk
Yeah.
happens and they all the entire it feels like the entire criminal element of the United States practically
That
descends on that
that
core.
public library is like a fentanyl busting
Oh my
area now,
That's
and
right,
god.
I messaged her because there was a shooting there. I don't know,
Broad
3 weeks
daylight.
ago. Yeah, right outside. But I am curious too, like with your, you mentioned I don't know a dozen or 15 of these shelters. Do you eventually open?
I'll need as many. Yeah, and it depends on the sizing of them. Like the
Right.
church I have at Church of Nazarene, the marshal can take it up. The
Sure.
fire marshal,
I'm
excuse,
just
can take it to 125, but a community center can take it up to 250.
yeah.
Sure.
But be aware, we're not going to have 250 in that shelter. We just have to
Yeah.
meet the Martin versus Boise
Right.
threshold,
We
which
just
is
have to say we
four.
have enough.
That's right.
I'm just curious, and that sounds great to me. But I'm curious,
We need a database
how do
though.
you how do those that world live with this world of remind me of the nonprofit that runs all the camps, the
Urban
Oh, Urban
alchemy.
Alchemy,
Urban
yeah.
Alchemy. Do those coexist
Nonprofit.
or
Absolutely, yeah.
okay?
So I'm not going to remove any resource,
Okay.
right? We're not closing
Sure.
anything.
And but
We're going
you're
to
not
soup.
relying on them more necessarily or less?
No.
Okay, okay.
Now,
Because
what I
they're
would
kind of
envision,
controversial is
Those are
what I've
extra
yeah.
heard.
beds,
Yeah.
I guess, that
So
you can count,
so
right? Is
Kaylee,
what you have. So you throw
yes,
them into
they're
the
existing
database.
beds. They're already
Yeah,
there,
or sorry,
right?
not extra. Yeah, they exist.
It's
So do you have what? Some sort of electronic database? Because that's the other issue is
Yeah,
yeah,
it's so
I was
piecemeal.
gonna bring that because
that's
even
right.
I think Daniel DeMello, who's on the Joint Office
Yes, Daniel
Budget
pointed
Advisory
that
Committee, a
out.
lot of people point out Jesse Burke as well that
Right, right.
she wants to
Jesse's
use that hotel software
yes,
to kind of track these shelter beds and
it's
stuff, and it
very
just seems to
smart.
be this problem of like I think I want to say the county wants to make their own software or something, or but we're in this place where we need
But Keith could
a lot
just
of this
do it. Could you
trackable stuff
not?
that you're talking
It's called
about.
So
it's called
Yeah.
a
silly.
shelter app. If
Why are we waiting on this?
Jesse's 100% right.
Yeah,
We're overthinking it, and then we'll try and overspend to create something
of
that's
course
already
we
been
will.
Yeah.
created. I mean, Jesse said, and I know that it's not the case, but she said I can buy software for $250. Well, while it might not be 250,
Yeah.
but her point is right,
It exists.
There's
We
existing
can use it.
and I want to
solutions.
make
Yeah.
everybody aware of this. We're in a disaster.
Yes.
We're
Oh, we're
treating this as
aware.
if we've got 10 years.
Oh,
We
I
should
know.
be
I
addressing
know.
this as if we got 10 months
Or
because our
less.
city
Or
is in
less.
decline.
Mhm.
And if we continue down this road, people are moving out in droves and they're taking their kids with them. And
Mm,
every time a family moves,
mm-hmm.
that's $14,000 out of our school system,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
Because that's
Yeah.
how much they'll receive from the state.
Mm-hmm.
We are in a decline situation. It is time to act, and there is no time to wait. So Jesse at County is going to be a huge supporter of that. Let's just bring existing systems into
Right.
play, but act. You were talking about urban alchemy.
Yep.
So the way I've set it up, and I've already been working with all of our homeless service providers. So Caleb Cotter is a wonderful young person, and he operates what's called Cultivate Initiative in Southeast Portland, in
Okay.
East Portland. I've already talked to him. I said, Caleb, I
What
want
is
you to.
that organization?
They are a homeless service provider.
Okay.
They primarily focus geographically in East Portland.
What are the services?
Shelter, work
Connecting to
connect.
shelter.
Yeah,
Okay.
so they have a work program,
Oh,
cleanup
okay.
program,
Okay.
recovery program.
How have we not heard of these people?
Yeah,
We
you
need
should
to have
have
them on.
Caleb is really a great. There's so many
I thought
great
you were
people out there
joking because
doing great
there's
work. So Caleb,
so many
I talked to him.
I
I
know.
said,
Well, I mean, this one sounds good.
it does sound good. Yeah.
so just to your point, how you
But you're
set it
right.
up. So Urban Alchemy, sure, they might, but Caleb really knows the Southeast area well. Why move him over to North Portland? So he would say, I
Hmm.
said, Caleb, I need 3 facilities in your area. Fine. Okay, we've got the Salvation Army. Salvation Army, I talked to them. They want to provide up to 5 facilities,
Mm.
and they want to staff them as well. So it's not fat, and they are really strong throughout the community.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? They have the Moore Street
It's very
facility on
effective.
Vancouver. They can have up to 300 people, 250, 300 people
They just
by
have such a
Marshall.
large overall footprint. Yeah, in the
Right.
city. Yeah.
So it's using existing homeless service providers who want to help. When you tell them, hey, we're going to end shelter homelessness. I want to have you be a part of that. They are, yes, where do I sign? So I had a meeting with, have you ever heard of what's called the neighborhood emergency teams?
No.
Okay.
I don't think I have.
So the
Yeah.
Portland Bureau of Emergency Management is always ready for an earthquake. Their main communications hub is over here on Powell.
Mhm.
If an earthquake happens, we're ready. We have a group of people that are already well trained. I'm a NET team
Hmm.
member, neighborhood emergency
Oh,
team.
I did know about this.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
So there are caches all
Yes,
around
that's right.
Yeah, I
Portland
was
that
just wondering, are
are
they the ones that set
shortwave
up the
communicate.
little,
That's right.
Yeah,
you can
I
look on your
forgot
on
about that.
portlandmaps.com and look at your neighborhood
That's
Mhm.
right.
area thing? Yeah.
Right. So I'm a NET team member.
Yeah.
And so if an earthquake occurs, we know where to go to get the communications device to shortwave communicate with emergency services because we have to assume our network is down,
Right.
right? But we have to still communicate. So I know where they are. So I met with the manager of the neighborhood emergency teams. There's 1,100 volunteers. And I asked him, I said, I want to activate you on April 1st. I just want you to activate your volunteers. And if they're willing to come in and do setup for 2 hours at
Mm-hmm.
night and knockdown at 2 hours in the morning, because we need to repurpose those community centers
Mhm.
right back to what they are. Community centers are closed at 5 o'clock on a Saturday. They don't
Mhm.
even open on Sunday. So we open up at 9 p.m. and we close at 6:30 or 7. But a net team member would come in, two or three of them come in and just set up the mats, greet the individuals because they're neighbors, right?
Mhm.
Greet the individuals coming in, get them set up for the night because we're just trying to get them through the night safely, right? And then they come back in the morning, a different set of two or three to help knock down and create and help the guests back out on into the day shelter. But let's okay, I'm kind of excited about the
No, it's
conversation. I've
okay.
not been able to have this sort of
Yeah.
conversation. So we have volunteers throughout the entire city ready to help. But let's also think about that day shelter. Andy, do you know that the people at the shelter that I was working with are going to work the next day? They're the
Mm.
people that are serving your coffee and your lunches. These are not just people that are
That's like
addicted to
Bivey
behavioral health
Lakes.
issues. Yeah, I want you to know that the unsheltered aren't nameless and faceless people. Those are the people that are making your sandwich. A large portion of the people that are unsheltered are your workforce the next day. So when you think about it, why are we letting them live in a tent?
Keith, explain this to me. What why is a sober person sleeping on a sidewalk? That it doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Well, you have all sorts of reasons, Kristen. There might be behavioral health issues. They might be a low acuity where the job that really suits them is working at a sandwich shop, right? And they may not have the ability to fill out an application for a house. They might have evictions on their record. They might have a criminal record. Do you know there's all these things that keep you from getting an apartment? There's one guy at the Do Good Vet Village who has a criminal record, owes $5,000 in fines and fees, misdemeanors, right? And he's at the shelter and he wants help, but that criminal record, and we have a Section 8 voucher for him. We have housing for him. But every time he fills out a housing application, it's denied, denied, denied. So he's at the shelter. He finally got tired of living at the shelter. And because he couldn't get out from underneath the criminal activity, he just went right back out onto the street. And
Mm.
that's why I started what's called the homeless court program.
Right.
It's if you join a shelter, I'll immediately put a stay on your warrants. But if you stay in the shelter for 4 months, the DA, the public defender, and the judge comes in and we remove your misdemeanors
I see.
and your
Yeah,
fines
I
and
see.
fees. But you don't have to do community service. You got to work on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that gentleman who is back out on the street now will have a tailwind to get housing because that application won't be denied anymore.
Mm-hmm. I do wonder about that percentage that you're talking about because
Yeah, I mean, don't
don't you,
most
you have
people
a
have
you have a
communities? I don't care if you're low acute. I mean, that was
Hmm.
my sister's low
yeah, I was gonna say
acuity.
you have a homeless
Yes,
relative,
and I
right?
mean,
Yeah.
it's just she's burned through
That's right.
every burned to the ground, every single one of us. And so the condition is always happy to help you. Will pay for any kind of rehabilitation, detoxification that you want, and the answer is no. So my question is, if it's a low acuity issue, I mean, and maybe this is what you're talking about, like where is that person's community? And I think that's sort of what you're talking about, which is let's get that get that person surrounded by that community again and figure like where is grandma? Where is aunt? Where is I mean,
It's
maybe mom and
interesting you
dad
say
aren't in the
that.
picture, but
I heard something the other day that homelessness is not a financial issue. It's a relationship issue. It's when individuals have lost
yes.
all their
Yeah, I would agree with
relationships.
that
I mean,
actually.
and
Yeah.
part
Yeah.
of that is,
Isn't that
I mean, a lot of
interesting?
it is drugs,
Yeah.
a lot of it
Yeah.
is mental illness, same thing. It was like,
Because and this is kind of a weird aside, but I think of Philip, who's been on my show
you're
and
right.
your show, and he was homeless for a while, but now
Yeah.
he's a student at PSU and he's been housed for many years, and but he doesn't have any family.
But his, that's
Yeah.
true, but
Um,
his story
but I
is
think he
that
has a
he,
relationship now with other, friends and community.
that,
Yeah.
and also he was able to get connected to mental health
Yeah,
services, and that I think that was just fortuitous.
with the VA or something, or
Something like that,
yeah,
but I
yeah,
just think, I mean, if you can get, that's right. If you can get on, I mean, that's that mental health piece, right? And if you can get, but it's so hard. I mean, that was my dad. It was just like, oh, mental illness out of control.
Hmm.
There was no way I was going to get him to, I mean, I did get him to a psychiatrist. He doesn't take the medication. He doesn't show up to the appointments. Really what we needed was a conservatorship, but I couldn't get one
Right. Yep.
because the
It's too hard.
threshold, yes, it is too difficult. There's Sharon Myron talks about this all the time.
Yes.
Danger to yourself and others. I mean, I remember, so this was in King County up in near Seattle, and they literally told me, the police, the social service workers, everybody I came into contact with, the psychiatrists themselves, unless he has a gun to his head, we cannot help you. And I finally got him to say he was suicidal. Got admitted to a hospital. Guess what? He's released the next day because now he doesn't want to kill himself anymore.
Yeah.
That is not help.
Yeah, that's right. So what you'll be seeing this year is there's a group of 36 county judges and experts, and they've created a group called Commitment to Change. It was started by our Supreme Court justice,
Okay.
and it's a 2-year program to end at the 2025 session, the upcoming session. So in California, they have what's called the CARES Court. It
Right.
just passed last year. In New York, it's called Kendra's Law, and it's called assisted outpatient treatment. It's just like you said. So what happens is we have so many rights for those that are and suffer from an acute like schizophrenia or bipolar, and they are hurting themselves. We see that this last week with the 51-year-old adult who had a psychotic
I
episode,
know.
and he stabbed another guy in
yeah,
TriMet and
yeah,
killed a father
yeah.
with a 6-year.
I feel like we read about it all the time
We,
now.
we do. So what this is, you're going to see this play out this year. It's allowing the judge. So Dan Waller is our mental
Right.
health
She's
judge.
great.
She is great, but she's tied. Her hands are tied.
Yes.
The fella has to, or the
Mm-hmm.
her court appointee has to do such an egregious thing to
Yep.
be put into the hospital. So
And that
she is left with
hospital's
just
full
releasing. Yeah. But
of murders and
what AOT will do, assisted outpatient treatment, it will allow Nan, it will allow Judge Waller to have that person before, and let's say it's your father and you're
mm-hmm.
standing
Mm-hmm.
next. Judge Waller would say, whatever your father's name was, I want you to know, here are your two choices. You're either going into prison or into
But they
the
have to come
institution,
into the contact with the criminal justice system first. Yes.
unfortunately. But
That's very unfortunate. But
no,
it's
no, no,
something.
no, no.
I
That's
agree.
what it is right now. But now this would be assisted outpatient treatment, where if they were assessed as clinically uh, uh, mental illnesses,
Where are they
clinically
assessed?
by the system, right? But it's a
Okay.
central,
It's
it's a
something.
brand new, it's called assisted outpatient
Mhm,
treatment.
mhm.
The threshold gets lowered, but then you can become the conservator,
Sure.
and the mental health court would say, okay, to your father, here's your two choices. We can commit you, or we can remand you to your daughter, but you must stay on your medication. You must
Yeah.
follow the program. And absent you following the program, if your daughter called us and said that he's not following the program, then we would have the ability to hold you, right? It's basically allowing that person to receive that medical treatment, because when you're mentally health impaired, you don't think that you have a
Well,
mental
of
health
course
issue
not. I mean,
and
that's
you
why
don't
these
take the
rights
drugs,
make no sense to me. Like,
right?
it's like, how are these people supposed to exercise their civil liberties when they don't know what
That's right.
day or time it is? They're not oriented times three.
Right. You know, it's an outcrop from the 60s and 70s when we had
I
just a
know.
very inhumane, but now we've reached to the point where we have people walking
We
down the street
swung too far the
naked.
other
Right,
way.
we're
Right. I see this often.
smothering them
I
with
see
love,
people,
or whatever you want to call it.
yeah,
Yeah, killing them with
I
love.
see people just
I know.
hurting themselves now,
Yeah,
and we are absent from really caring for our
Yes.
community, and it affects
That
the
is not
whole community,
compassion.
including your father. And I'm so sorry to hear what you've had to go through,
I
and I
guess
wish you well.
thank you. I guess this
Yeah,
dovetails with your plan because the
it
issue is he
does.
did not come into contact with the criminal justice system ever. But I mean, a lot of that is because he just found a way to hop around or get
Yeah.
services or whatever, go from motel to apartment to whatever. But to the extent he would have ended up on a sidewalk, it dovetails with your plan, which is,
That's
hey,
right.
you can't stay here. Let's get you connected to this. And then if the answer is still no, now you're in the system. Now you're in this mental health court. And now
Right.
away we go.
You know, and here's another way that my plan segues and benefits that. So we have 4,000 people we shelter. We know that 1,300 will come in and two or
Right.
3,000 won't. And Be that as it may, if my numbers are right or wrong, it doesn't matter. We're going to end unsheltered homelessness. But what it really does is a lot of people are going to come inside, they're going to seek care, or they'll leave. We understand. But now let's say your father is roaming the streets because he has behavioral health issues. And we're going to have hundreds of people on the street. But
Yeah,
here's how we right the ship. We have 80 outreach workers out there that are chasing 4,000 people tonight. They're overwhelmed. And if you talk to somebody that's homeless, they'll say, I've never seen an outreach worker.
that's right.
We
Hmm.
immediately have a systems improvement because if we have 200 people like your father out on the street and 80 outreach workers, we have a fighting chance to start building trust with that
Mhm,
person.
mhm.
And that outreach worker will see that person every day, every day. Hey, Sam. Hey,
Hmm.
Sam, I can help you. Sam, I can help you.
It's kind of building that
People come.
relationship that you were
That's
talking about. Yeah.
right. You only come inside when you trust that the people inside are there and they have your back. You're not
I
going to come
mean,
inside if you're just going to be in a shelter.
from experience though, it's like that light bulb wasn't going to turn on. I
I
mean, a lot of
understand
the
that.
time you're not going to recognize Jim from Paul from
Mm.
whatever outreach worker was giving you a beer or whatever the
And you're
other
right.
day. I
But at
mean,
least the officers start to know who that person's
oh,
name
the
is. And they're
officers,
going to be
oh, the
less
officers always
inclined.
know him well.
Right. And so, but
They know
keep
all
in
of them.
mind, an officer's that is not overwhelmed and learns your father's name begins that relationship and we care for the community. That's called community policing. We are so far away from community
Yeah, we
policing
can't.
right now.
All we can do is react.
That's exactly right.
Yeah,
And oftentimes when you react, sometimes the worst outcomes occur.
sure.
Yeah. I mean, this is. Do you guys want to talk any more about homelessness before we move on to some other stuff?
I mean, this is great, Keith.
I can
Thank
keep
you.
going.
I
Yeah.
Yeah,
can tell your frustration. I want you to know, and I can tell
And it's
you're in
not.
somewhat disbelief, and you should be.
No, no,
I
yeah, yeah.
want people to challenge me
oh,
because
I'm
I
not in
want people to know
disbelief because you're right.
we
You look around, people can do this. I
we can
mean,
do this.
Well,
people don't understand.
Absolutely.
Not everywhere looks like Portland.
yeah.
Please go
No
to New York
no
City
place
where
looks
they
like
shelter.
Well,
Portland.
No place looks like this.
and
I
I'm glad that
know.
you have kind of shaped your strategy around the Ninth Circuit thing because I bring it up almost every single
Absolutely. You got to know the
episode.
laws.
And like that's just our big hurdle on the West Coast is,
It
We
that's
doesn't
use
need
it
to
as an
be.
excuse.
yeah,
Yes, thank
Just
you.
care for your community. We don't need a law to tell us that,
yeah.
right? We don't need a law to say care for your neighbors.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Well, and I also like that I kind of prefer people with a business background to coming into just get, I don't know, all the stuff we talked about, metrics and spending money wisely. It just seems like a better kind of route to go. So I do appreciate that, what you bring to that.
Thank you.
But yeah, um, otherwise I was going to move on here. Let me see. I'm going to ask you about
what else
this.
could we talk about?
I'm going to ask
I,
you.
I will. It is the 800-pound gorilla.
Yeah, it is.
So
Yeah. Well,
I like to, if
And I
you want on the
appreciate
table, I will
that.
take it. And I like people challenging me because I learn with everybody's perspective, even hearing from you and your father, it's like, I learn, the more I learn because we got to act,
yeah,
there's
and
no
honestly,
time
I
to
don't
wait.
even think it's just us three. It's everyone I talk to that comes on the show and just in my neighborhood and everything. It's the number one thing that people
Yeah.
is
And
on
it
their
ties into
mind.
public safety. It
Yeah,
ties into business
yeah,
climate. You can't have a small business in Portland if you have somebody sleeping in your doorway,
No,
treating it like a bedroom
yeah,
and a
yeah,
toilet. How
yeah.
can we do that? We can't
yeah.
compete. So, okay.
Um. So yeah, let me ask you about this
Now we're gonna
high
pivot. I
speed
like
rail thing because
it.
the high speed rail
We're gonna
it's. I was telling her send her a message like California's been trying to do this for like decades. Like,
yes,
why do you think you can make this happen? I have a
California.
little more faith in you now that you explained your
Yeah,
freight business,
yeah.
but
It's interesting. So we're gonna go from unsheltered
I
homelessness
know. Yeah.
to the 20-year project. I love that because that's like ending unsheltered homelessness is my key number one goal. But high-speed rail is how we unlock the potential for our Cascadia region.
Mhm.
So high-speed rail is like a brand new main street. It goes from Vancouver, BC to Eugene, and we can get to any big city in an hour. So imagine you want
I
to go see a
love that.
Mariners game in
I
Seattle.
love that. I
You
love
get
that. I
on a
love that.
train
I hate
at
driving
six
to
o'clock.
Seattle.
You're in Seattle for the game at 7, and it costs a third of what it would cost to drive and takes a third of the time to drive.
Can people smoke fentanyl on the high speed rail?
Okay, see, we're going right back
Right. Yeah.
to see, go back.
Well, I
Why
was gonna.
I would hope not,
99% or
I was
whatever of
gonna
our
ask,
public transport
is this like what Amtrak should be? Because we have
well,
this with
Amtrak is
Amtrak.
going to stay with Amtrak because you
Okay.
still need what are called intercity trains.
Okay.
It links with Amtrak, but it's a high velocity, high frequency, low cost system, all electric. So to give you kind of an idea, all right, let me go back to the beginning. I used to live in Europe.
Hmm.
And I was amazed at how
The
quickly I got
the rail
everywhere, and
system.
I
Yeah. Yeah.
never used a car. And when I lived in New York City, I never had a
Right,
car,
right.
and I could get anywhere in the city in
Yes.
15 minutes, the most congested city in the world. and I would just go underground and
Yeah.
take the subway. I was amazed. And when I lived in London and I traveled Europe,
Mhm.
I always used high-speed rail, and it was amazing
It is.
how fast you could get from one place to the other. So I've really started, and as a transportation expert, I understand that. So I've
Mm.
been working with high-speed rail networks from around the world. So every summer, I'll vacation somewhere. I take my family, they know it, and I know all the CEOs of all the major networks around the nation. Again, look at my Facebook or LinkedIn, and I rode in the cab of a high-speed rail train, getting up to 300 kilometers per hour. And they let me tape it. It was great.
What's miles per hour? What is that?
It's 200 miles per hour.
Okay.
That's
That's
amazing.
very
So
fast.
I've
Yeah.
been working with our federal officials,
That would
Senator
be
Wyden. If you
perfect.
look at my campaign website, keithwilsonformayor.com, if you go
Mhm.
to high speed rail, you'll see a presentation that Senator Wyden and I did at the Eugene Chamber. Because Senator Wyden has been point at funding the transportation network
Yeah.
through the IIJA, that brand new $1 billion package that Biden passed a
That's
couple
a
years ago.
federal
Yeah.
agency or something, or yeah.
Yeah, the
Oh, it's a package. You
IIJA
say.
was the Infrastructure and Investment Jobs Act.
Okay.
Okay,
I think I
was
remember.
a
Yeah.
$1 trillion package
Yeah.
to really improve our infrastructure around the nation. And in so, we carved out $95 billion for rail. And in that, we carved out $10 billion for high-speed rail, never before funded in
Okay.
the US. The US
Hmm.
is the last developed nation without high-speed rail.
And
Right.
that's why I'm asking you. I'm like, if California can't do it,
Well,
you
here's
think
what
Right.
you can do it?
California got so frustrated, they said, we're going to go do it on our own. High-speed rail is a mega project.
Okay. They
Think
they tried to take it on a state level.
They try to take it on a state level. And
Yeah.
so they have a program that's significantly underfunded with fits and spurts. Now, think about our highway system in the 50s and 60s.
Hmm.
It was a national imperative
Yes.
because we were in a Cold War. The federal government
Yes.
funded every highway at a rate of 4 to 1. So as we built our I-5, when ODOT went forward to the federal government, we said, hey, we have $100 million, and the federal government would immediately match us with $400 million. It was because it was a federal focus. The feds are now starting to focus that we can't compete nationally and globally without high-speed rail. So they are funding planning money right now at a 9 to 1 match. So I wrote a
Okay.
bill last year in the state legislature,
9 to 1.
9 to 1. It's planning money. They'll fund the actual construction at 4 to 1.
That's great.
It is great. So I've been working. I have,
Why wouldn't we pick up those
in fact,
nickels?
Representative Gamba, who's the
Uh-huh.
next
Uh-huh.
district.
Mark
He's going
Gamba.
to be
Yeah.
my chief sponsor. Senator
Great.
Gorsuch's going to be my Senate chief sponsor.
Awesome.
And I'm working with Washington State Department of Transportation. I met with
Mhm.
ODOT last week. I'm
Thank you.
creating a coalition in Oregon to match Washington. And my team met with Secretary Buttigieg a year ago. And our Cascadia line, that'll go from Eugene to Vancouver, BC, is one of their top 5 projects to fund.
Thank
Wow.
God.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
what it means to you is that you won't have to build roads anymore.
Yeah.
Because if you can go from Portland to Seattle in an
I
Oh,
hour,
think
yeah.
you'll
anyone in
never
yeah, I think
Oh,
drive
look,
again.
anyone in
Keith, I
Portland
know
would do
what it
that.
means
Yeah.
to me. I'm fantasizing right now. I hate
Yeah.
that drive with a passion.
Yeah.
So
Everybody
It
does.
never ends up taking as long as
Oh, it ends up being
supposed to.
like
yeah.
Mhm.
6 hours.
Yeah.
It's, you're funneled at every it's
Mhm.
Tacoma. It's I mean, if you're going
Amazing.
all the way up to Everett, you're screwed because you're
You
if
are
there's a
screwed. I
bottleneck
have
in
a
Seattle there. Yeah.
my biggest facilities in Seattle,
Mm-mm.
and I have made that route 1,000 times.
Mhm.
So here's what high-speed rail does. So, and I know this through working with the Italian, they have Trenitalia and they have NTV, so I know their operators. So a decade ago, they had higher speed rail between Milan and Rome.
Okay.
Higher speed is 125 miles per hour.
Mhm.
And that market share was at 40% of everybody who traveled that lane took rail, higher speed. They converted it to high speed rail a decade ago, so it went up to 200 miles per hour. That market share went to 80%.
Yes, of course.
Anybody who goes on that route now is going to take high-speed rail. So we
Yes.
don't have to fund outdated roadways
No.
that are overloaded. Our runways are overloaded. Nobody
Yes.
will fly from Portland to Seattle again. And very few people will drive because you can be there in an hour and you can do your work.
Right.
Yeah.
I
Right.
mean, it's
And it's
amazing
not
how
as
clean and
uncomfortable as
efficient
a
it is.
plane.
We got to stop building roads as a singular
Planes are
focused
so
community. And
uncomfortable.
here's the cool thing. When you have high-speed rail, it means you start investing in everything else. The
Yes.
max lines, the streetcars,
Mhm. All
the
of the stuff
trans
that
Because
connects
they're
to
all
it.
getting
yes,
to
Yeah.
it.
because a car, yes, it's necessary and effective for some because it becomes the slower mode, not the fastest mode.
Right.
And in Portland, since 1993, our congestion has increased 250%.
Mhm.
You're
Mhm.
spending that much more time in the car than
Mhm.
you did in this last
It's so
20, 30
frustrating.
years.
Yeah.
It's crazy, and it's only going to
Even
get
this week, it was
worse.
taking me an hour to get home every. I don't know why, but
Yeah, yeah,
I
it's
work
getting
up in
worse.
Vancouver. But
Yeah,
yeah,
now we can start thinking about building subways. We can start
Now you don't
building
even have to worry about
L's
that
and stuff
stupid
like that.
bridge.
It's a 20-year thing. And you'll like this. So the last thing on my website, it's called Cascadia Olympics 2040.
I
So
saw that on there. Yeah,
I want people to
you're trying
dream
to
because
build an Olympic appeal to.
yeah, so I always
Huh,
notice we only
that's
move
very
as a
smart.
nation if we focus on a spectacle or a war.
Yeah,
Mhm.
It's the only thing we do things fast
That's
and
true.
big, right? We built the highway system because we were in a Cold War. We
hmm
have to we had to have a logistics systems that allowed us to move people and cargo fast when we built the highway system. So the way I look at it, so tell we can have the first multi-city, multi-country Olympics called the Cascadia. That's my dream. It's a 20-year dream. That I like to talk about homelessness first because we can't get to that dream
yeah,
unless we
yeah.
get past this next 12 months. But let's also dream.
When it
This
all,
is
This
Portland,
is fun. I
everybody.
mean,
yeah,
this is fun and this is
Yeah.
infrastructure and it's
Yes.
also necessary, but I like how you prioritize these things because I agree with you that this homelessness, drugs, mental illness stuff, that's got to be front and
We're
center.
gonna
That
address
is,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
hmm
But keep in mind, you need a mayor who isn't talking about just living in the city for
right.
the next 12 months. We were and had the best transportation system in the United
Yeah.
States. Go back to the 80s and the 90s when
yeah.
we built our downtown core.
Yeah, I
There was a
know.
We
point
were
where it
the
was
envy.
looking just
I
yeah
know.
bright and everything.
Where
Yeah,
did we lose track?
yeah,
Where did we lose track? And that's why that's why Commissioner Lindbergh's on my team.
yeah.
You know, he was the commissioner for Bud Clark's, who was the
Mhm.
mayor, and Commissioner Blumenauer. Our team back then did a great job at caring for our city, and our downtown core was livable. It was
Mhm.
vital.
Mhm.
It was vibrant. Why? And I tell you,
Yeah.
why can't we do that again? And we can, but we need leadership. We cannot continue to focus on failed policies. We can't chastise county and say it's your fault when we need to be leading our city from within. Quit blaming people and take action now. So I want high speed rail, and I'm going to develop high speed rail here.
Yeah.
It's going to
Well,
happen.
I
I have
hope
a
it. Yeah.
huge team,
I love it.
but I try not to talk too much because it's the cart before the horse. It's
Right.
like
Right.
people
Yeah.
are just trying to get to work
No,
without
I know.
feeling
Yeah.
helpless.
Without
Yeah.
trying to be stabbed
But
or get fentanyl blown in their
yeah,
face or whatever. Yeah.
but as mayor, I have a host of priorities, but I
Yeah.
know what my key singular focus is. But we also need to trust that somebody has our future
Yeah. I
in
like that.
mind.
Yeah. I like the linkage between sort of the lofty goals, but getting there, you have to go over these obstacles first, and
Absolutely.
have solutions for a lot of these problems that are just in our face. Um, but maybe this is a good time to ask you because I was asking you a little before the show about. In my mind, there's this reckoning of work from home and this transportation stuff.
Mm.
And for one day, it just clicked on me because I drive by the Springwater Trail here every day, and it's basically empty. And I'm
Yeah.
just, and it clicked in my head
Except
one
for
day of like,
tens.
a lot of these
Yeah.
laptop class people don't have to go anywhere
That's
when they
right.
work, including the city, which I believe their policy is
Yes.
they
Yes.
can stay home 2 days a week.
Oh,
So
at
I'm just
least.
curious, like in building out that downtown core, this vision of revitalizing downtown, how do those two things coincide or
You're right.
coexist? And
So I talk about a
um,
vibrant city, and you have to address your urban core. If your urban core is dying, then the heart of your city is dying.
mhm,
And so let's talk about all the buildings. We have 30% vacancy.
yeah,
I'm going to take that and flip that from a negative to a positive. We could be the innovation hub of the nation because our rents are falling so far so fast. But let me explain to you some numbers before we walk
sure,
into
yeah,
the solution. So Montgomery Park
hmm
is a building in Northwest Portland.
the old sign. You see the
Yeah,
big,
right.
huge sign up there. Yeah,
So let's talk about what's going to happen if we don't take action. That building sold in 2019 for $250 million. It sold a month ago for 50.
yeah,
Mhm.
I saw that and it made
So
headlines. I think. Yeah,
here's what's going to happen.
mhm,
So now that's a reassessment on its property taxes. So it's been reassessed down to 50, and the taxes on that have fallen 80%. So our city is going to cycle downwards because we're not going to be able to collect taxes to service our police and our
Mhm.
fire. So we have an emergency again. We have to end unsheltered homelessness, improve livability because we're at 30% core vacancy rate in our downtown core. Now, how do we revitalize that, right? So that's why it has to be done immediately. Livability starts first. Public safety has to be improved.
mhm.
And then people will move here if it's a vibrant and low rents because low rents are going to come from that, which is okay. Let's just recognize what we're left with and make that lemonade out of the lemons, right?
Yeah.
Now imagine a city that's livability is improved, public safety is improved, and we're revitalized, vibrant. Now we have all those empty buildings. So the federal government, the Biden administration, just put forward $10 billion to convert office buildings to housing.
Okay. I was
Uh,
asking that. Remember
the
that?
DOT just
Yeah.
released a $35 billion package for low interest, below market loans if you convert offices to homes in a transportation corridor, which is our downtown
Was
area.
this part of his big housing speech that he did recently? Was it?
Part of it,
Okay.
yes. So those funds have just become available. Now we must take advantage of it if people wanted. So we have to convert those offices over. So right now we're allowing a $3 million cap on a seismic upgrade to a building. That's nothing when you're converting a building. So what I propose is
What?
using,
Hold on. Can you explain that, Cap? What do you
sure.
mean?
So if you have an office building built before 1994 downtown and you want to convert it to housing,
Mhm.
you have to seismically
Oh,
upgrade
right.
it.
Okay. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Which means
I've
that all
heard
of a
this.
sudden we're
Yeah.
spending all this money to seismically upgrade. Well, I would say don't tell the developers what they should spend the money on. In Calgary, they created a $150 million fund, and they said, if you convert a office to housing, we'll give you a $50 per credit per square foot.
Hmm.
So we're gonna,
So a
and
good
then we, and they
incentive. Yeah.
then instead of, but they didn't give any sort of requirements.
Right. Right.
They had so many people applying for applications to convert from
Yeah.
offices,
We
but
had an architect down here, and that's what we were saying. If we dropped, you're saying if we dropped the seismic thing, it would just
I'm
go.
not saying we drop it.
Okay.
I'm saying, why would we not convert an office building that's built after 1994 if
I
it can be
see. I
done at a
see.
lower cost?
Because the 94 is the seismic
Yeah. So
cutoff.
in other words,
Yeah.
why put all of our money in seismic upgrading an office when it can be used as an office?
Yeah.
Find a newer building.
Can't you also just can't we knock it off with this inability to build here? I mean, it is so difficult. So when this architect
Permitting.
came on,
Yeah.
he very brilliantly distilled why, I mean, mine included, why contractors won't work in the city of
Yeah.
Portland anymore. And he was just like, it is just too frustrating. Like the places that are exciting to build in are in Arizona, they're in Houston, they're, I
Sure.
mean, Texas generally, they're in places where you can build. And
What? I was surprised because it wasn't necessarily the permitting
no, it
bureau.
was
It was the all of
the
these like committee
planning.
meetings and stuff that you
Yeah,
have.
yeah.
Because I don't know. There's a lot of ways people can immediately stop planning on a lot of your building, as according to what he
Yeah, it
was
was
saying.
like committee after committee
That's
after,
right.
and he had to be prepared for them to come at him with this enormous code every single time. And then he has to argue why that doesn't make sense or why we need to innovate this piece. And so that part of the code shouldn't be applied to this, or hey, we are applying it and here's what we're doing. And he was like, I mean, he has to be a code expert
That's right.
to the level, the what he was explaining. I mean, I'm a lawyer. What he was explaining, as I told him on that episode, it sounds like statutory interpretation, like
Mm.
me going to the state archives and sifting through legislation. And he said, "Oh, it's exactly like that."
I like that you brought up Arizona and Houston because you just told me it doesn't have to be.
Of course not.
All right.
Mhm.
So understand, we created all these rules for some reason at a particular time, but here's what happens with our new form of government. So you're asking me to become the CEO of the city of Portland
Mhm.
because as mayor, that's essentially what I'm going to be because I don't have other bureaus now. I am running the entire enterprise.
What about the argument that you're a weak mayor now, and so really who's running it is the city manager?
No, I hire and fire the city manager.
That's true.
Yeah. I also create and develop the budget with collaboration with the county. Budget is policy, Kristen. So whoever
Yes,
develops the
that's
budget
exactly
is
right.
policy. So I would counter anybody who say it's a weak. People think it's a weak mayor because you don't have veto. But talking to mayors as to prepare for this role, I've been befriending mayors around the nation, and I asked them about veto, and they said, in fact, let's go back to Boise. Mayor Beater said, Keith, I was a 16-year mayor and I used veto twice. And he
Mhm.
said, and the one time I used it was a political, just to shoot a round across the bow of council, and then they
Hmm.
overrode me anyways. He
Mhm.
said, he says it's often used or thought of as being, but he says, Keith, if you have budget, you have policy. If you have hire and fire the city administrator,
Yeah.
that vision mission is yours.
Mm.
You are accountable to the city, and I'll be accountable. You're right. It's a Byzantine approach to permitting, but the problems are our bureaus. You have
Well,
five
I
mini
don't dispute
mayors.
that.
You have five mini mayors, and each one of them wants control over their bureaus, and they create these
Yeah.
these rules, and they don't interact.
Yeah.
But now they're gone.
So yeah, I was just gonna ask. So you think with this new city council that'll mostly be gone, or
So
yeah?
Kristen's point is we need a permitting strike team, or we need
Yeah, or just
a
an
caretaker
ability
to
to
move
build.
the
Yeah,
process forward. If we want housing, and if I need housing as mayor, then I will accelerate the process.
Mm-hmm.
right.
So going back to the conversion from workspace to
Mm-hmm.
home space, right? The Calgary example where we apply a credit. Calgary also said that no permit can take more than 2 months.
Oh, I like
So
that.
they set the
That's
Yeah.
goal and then they
amazing.
told the
Can you
permitting
imagine?
department, here's your goal. You don't get to operate outside of that line. And so that's why everybody ran to convert those offices
Sure.
into apartments because a developer said, okay, I'm going to escrow my money for $150 million. And instead of waiting 2 years like in Portland, because you got to pay
Right.
interest on that escrow,
Right.
Mm,
I only have to wait for 2 months. I want to work in Calgary. I want to work in Portland because they're going to tell me in 2 months if they're going to approve it or dis. Now, here's the beauty as mayor and council. We get to determine which permits we agree or don't. And if you come to us and say, I want to build a high-rise building of apartments for the ultra rich, we deny that. We say we want middle income housing downtown,
Yeah, I
or
mean,
we
the
want
ultra
affordable
rich aren't coming
housing.
in here
Do you
anyway.
get where I mean?
We
We
learned
have
that from
yeah.
the
ultimate
Ritz.
control
Mhm.
on what it permits. We can say yes or no. If we need affordable workforce housing in downtown Portland, then we permit that and we communicate to our developers. Here's what we need.
Sure.
We need deeply affordable. We need middle income. We need mixed use housing in these things because we have an extraordinary transportation system downtown.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all the things on the levers that we have. And as mayor, those are what we have. Now, the council is definitely a part of this equation. So you need somebody who works well with others, who collaborates well, and that's essentially what I do at my business currently. So,
Yeah.
I'm not a
It is.
bombastic, argumentative guy. I outwork everybody. I out research everybody, and then I use this. The quote that drives my life. I was a hard charging young guy, type A. I wanted people to work harder, try and keep it, and it couldn't happen. So oftentimes people would leave. But then I discovered this quote by Desmond Tutu, and he says, "Don't grow angry, improve your argument." Which means it's on me to
Sure.
improve my argument, to do better research, to understand
Totally.
people's perspective, to put myself and listen to them, because you ultimately have a much better decision that will work because it's input from others who are generally going to be using and or um, living in that environment,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, that's
No,
philosophical.
I like
You got
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I was curious. This is kind of a random question, but have you been talking with any city council candidates or
Oh
like
yeah.
about? Okay.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
they're all friends. I mean,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
will tell you, I had beers with Mingus 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Carmen is super sharp,
Mm-hmm.
lovely person. Renee is very caring for his community. Dan Ryan is a high school classmate of mine.
Hmm,
Dan's super sharp.
that's so funny.
Yeah, he and I went to high
You guys
school
went to high
together.
school together? Wow, that's
Yeah,
funny.
and
I think
Dan, I
you did
mean,
tell me that. That's
yeah,
right.
super sharp. So yeah, I'll
No, okay. I
I'll
was just
keep it
curious.
there.
Yeah. Okay, let me see here. Yeah, since we're talking about this stuff, do you have a favorite Portland mayor of all time?
Bud Clark.
Okay, everyone's got to say Bud Clark.
Irreverent,
Everybody,
nice,
yeah.
and he was the last to end unsheltered homelessness.
Yeah.
The plan that I'm bringing forward, if you go to Portland Archives and if you type in "breaking the cycle of homelessness," Bud Clark's plan that
Was it a
that
10-year? What was it?
well, no, it was right. It was breaking the cycle of homelessness, but his main focus was to end unsheltered homelessness
Mm,
immediately, and he did that, and it was a nationally lauded program. And Dan Steffi, the fellow who was Mayor Clark's assistant mayor, he's on my Shelter
Hmm.
oh, there you
Portland
go.
team.
There you go.
He wrote that report, and he's advising us because we don't need to rewrite this program. We don't
Mm,
need to recreate the
I love
wheel. It's
that.
been done, so all I'm doing is bringing all the experts who've already done it,
I love that.
who are already on my team.
It's like the opposite of
I have
Portland.
lunch in Bergen County at the end of the month with Julie Orlando. She ended homelessness, not only unsheltered homelessness, she ended homelessness in her county, the same size as Multnomah County, and it's a mile away from New York City. New York City tonight will have 60,000 people in shelter.
Yeah.
Julia will have a few dozen. So you can't tell me it can't be done. It's not an affordability issue because they have a higher affordability
Right. That's
cost than we do.
exactly
yeah,
right.
yeah.
They have the
Way
same
higher. Yeah.
population as Multnomah County. Is a leadership issue, a
Yes.
failed leadership issue. But guess what? On January 1st, I'm going to need your help, Andy. I'm going to need your help, Kristen, and all your listeners in Portland because we're going to care for our community. See, it always goes back to homelessness, doesn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's on everyone's mind. Let's get into your. I'm sorry, I kind of skipped past this, but let's just put it all into your Northwest story, your business experience. You were telling me before we started that you used to work in TV,
I
like
did,
I
yeah,
did,
I
in
did.
Oh,
sales.
I didn't
Yeah,
know that. That's
yeah.
funny.
Yeah. So I grew up poor in North Portland. There was 7 of us living in a 900 square foot home. I lived right next to the Columbia Villa, which is now New Columbia. Dad delivered luggage from the airport that was lost.
Mm,
Mom was an Avon lady. They worked extremely hard. And as a 10-year-old, I had a bike, and I spent a lot of time at the University of Portland. I'd
Oh
sneak
yeah.
onto the basketball court, work with all the coaches, befriended them all. And I think that sort of instilled in me this focus of getting a college education. I
mm,
love that experience. And so I was always driven. At Roosevelt, it was a great school, but it was a vocational school. It was Army,
mhm,
trucking, longshoreman. And I always dreamt of going to college. And so I graduated and I went to PCC, loved it. Spent 2 years there, then I went to Oregon State, loved it, you know, and then I picked up my stakes and I said, "I'm gonna go live in New York City," because I always wanted to know what can I learn more? And so I People's Express, so for $50, I bought a ticket from Eugene and I landed in Newark, Airport, and then
Wow.
I started interviewing for jobs, my one suit, and I started interviewing, and before you know it, I got an offer at Morgan Stanley, and I got an offer from NBC. And I took the NBC job because it sounded so much more fun. And so I worked my way into junior account executive, working in primetime sales at 30 Rock.
wow, that's so cool.
It was an extraordinary job. And so for 3 years, I did that. And that's how I got into TV. That was kind of the direction I was going. And then I had an opportunity to go work in Australia and New Zealand for a network there that was buying 25% of the content from NBC.
Mm.
Mm,
And they had converted their station from a private, pardon me, from a public, like a BBC network, British Broadcasting Company network, all public, like an OPB, to private, but they had never had commercials before.
Yeah, it's
S-
interesting you point that out because I was trying to move to Australia like years ago. You know, I told you this, but I was talking to
I
a guy
didn't
on
know that.
TV who works there, and he was explaining all that we're basically like the BBC. We
Used
don't
to.
allow advertising,
Yep.
at least
Hmm.
on the public stations.
Yeah, on
Do
the
they
public
let people
stations.
move there?
What?
Do they let people move? Like, unlike Europe, could you
I
move
don't know.
there?
If you
I
have a
think I
specialty.
needed a
Sure, a
job
work visa or
first, and
something.
that's why
Yeah,
I was asking
Yeah.
exactly.
this guy
Yeah, yeah,
about that.
yeah.
But
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's what they were doing. So they were converting, and they didn't know how to really
make
commercialize.
sales and yeah,
Right.
yeah,
And so I started and so the interesting thing, since this is a long format, I'm going to tell you a long
yeah,
story.
yeah.
So I told them I'd be there in 6 months because I wanted to see the world.
Mm.
And I found myself living in Europe when the Berlin Wall
Hmm.
Oh
came down.
wow, wow.
And I thought, wow, this is amazing. So I rented a bus in London, and 12 friends jumped on the bus and we drove through
You
Western Europe.
Like
rented a
Drove
bus?
Trapeze or something.
I
Like,
drove across Eastern Europe, right?
it's so
So
And
cool.
I
you're a
ended
bus
in I
driver as
ended
well?
no, no, no. I just
You're
Oh,
in
rented
the
a
I
same
see,
bus.
I
Europe.
No,
see.
it was New Year's Eve
I see.
1989.
He was literally a
And
bus
I
driver,
thought, "Oh my God,
not by
look what's going
vocation.
on over in Berlin. The wall is on the
Yeah.
verge of falling." Gorbachev and Glasnost was taking over. And I thought, and so I just talked to my friends and said, "Hey, I'm going to rent a bus. We should go to New Year's Eve in Berlin. This could be a
That
really special
historic moment.
time."
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And we jumped on the bus and we ended up there. You drive through East Germany, all that stuff. I mean, so it's a real eye opener. And sure enough, the wall came down on New Year's Eve 1989, and I was on the wall, and it was one of the most
You were
profound.
on it?
I was on the
Wow.
wall. We all had our hammers, but we jumped
Wow.
over to the other side, and as we're seeing the Russians being pulled back,
Mhm.
and you see the East Germans being pulled back, the border guards, it was an amazing. And so we jumped down into East Berlin, and we see families reuniting who hadn't seen each other in 40 years, and we're just a bunch of knuckleheads trying to have fun. And then they started saying, "Come talk to us." And we started listening to their stories, and you realize democracy was really starting to take over. And so I got caught up in that whole move of democracy and started traveling through Africa, through Asia, because everything was starting to democratize at that time.
Right.
Mm.
And so I end up in New Zealand a year later, and they still wanted to hire me, which was crazy.
Wow.
But at that point, I had long hair
Yeah.
because I had really enjoyed
Longer
the
than mine, was
travel,
it?
longer than yours.
Okay.
Yeah. And I spoke to the CEO, Trevor, and I said, "I'm sorry, but I want to go back to Portland," because I had seen all the great cities of the world at that point, or I should say many of them.
Hmm.
And I will tell you, none of them came close to Portland.
Hmm.
And so I came back to Portland and I said, "I'm going to stake my claim here." And my father had a small transportation business, small package. I started talking to Irwin Starr, the general manager at KGW, and King up in Seattle, and then NBC in Burbank. And Dad said, "Hey, why don't you try this?" And I thought, I might as well. And I did, and it stuck, and I loved it. I love logistics because you can control the whole method, like the inputs, the
Hmm.
process, the output. It was all numbers based, systems improvement. Went back and got a master's on how can I really make this complex system as smooth and as effortless as possible. So I became just growing that business, and then I started using artificial intelligence for driver safety systems. So we now have,
Like recently, or
yeah, about 5 years ago, we
okay?
had a spate of accidents because of all the driving the cell phones, right?
Mm.
Our accident rate was going through the roof. So I
Mhm.
added AI in the truck. And so now if a driver picks up a phone, the AI can see and just gives them a reminder, driver's distracted. And then I monetize it. And then the guys all compete on who has the safest driving record, and then they
Right,
earn
right.
income on it. So it really made it kind of a gamification, if you will.
Yeah.
And then sustainability,
Yeah, he was just
climate.
explaining
Yeah.
got the first
Well,
Freightliner electric.
we were the first in Oregon to remove fossil fuels from my Portland fleet.
Mm.
Fossil fuels, renewable diesel. I converted. Now I have a three-state operation where we are 84% fossil fuel free.
And
Hmm.
this is your current company,
What are they
My
running
current,
on?
it runs on renewable diesel,
Uh-huh.
which
Okay.
is
Yes,
biodiesel.
right.
organic
Right.
compound, but it's a lower cost than petroleum diesel, and it's 80% less emissions, and my engines run cleaner,
Right.
which is amazing. Now, I just took delivery of the first electric fleet of trucks a
Hmm.
few months ago. In fact, I'm having a celebration in 2 weeks,
Yeah, he
letting
invited me.
everybody come and
Yeah.
drive
That's so
electric
nice.
trucks.
Because I love semi trucks, that's why.
I didn't
Yeah.
know that. That's nice.
So, and then the systems part of it. If you come to our facility, we don't have anything that's fossil fuel based. It's all systemated. So I've built websites. I've built a complex system of information
Okay, okay.
flow to it. And the real accolade is the last 2 years, Titan, my company, has been awarded National Innovator of the Fleet Award, National Innovator of the Year award
Because of all the
twice.
stuff you,
All these other things
yeah.
that, yeah, all the things. So my focus is to really bring that record of achievement of success, but we need to scale it up and bring it to the city. And I'll use the same sort of template. Right. I'm a CEO and the mayor is essentially a CEO. Has to have that vision and mission. And that's what I have. I have a culture at at our facility where everybody knows my expectations and they know what's expected. So they love that sort of where they stand and who
Hmm.
they are, but it's they always know they're going to go home safe every single night. I care for them, I pay well, I have great benefits. And they're a team. They're essentially you it becomes more of a family when you do things right. They know exactly what they do, where they stand. Um, and from an equity and inclusion standpoint, because there's full transparency on wages, I have clear guidelines on what you need to do to achieve the next level, whether it's education, whether it's a certain skill level, a certification. Everybody knows where they stand. And when you do that, you create a culture where everybody really likes their work and likes to be there. And then we're the safest carrier in Oregon. We have the lowest um, experience rating, which means we have the safest workforce in Oregon.
Mm.
But we're very good at the details. I mean, we have a list of best practices. Every job is clearly defined. You know exactly what you should be doing and where. But
Hmm.
we really
Yeah.
apply. And when you make a mistake, we do not just fire people. Mistakes are a great way to learn how to do things right. And it's a real, you have to clear your mind of thinking, oh, you made a mistake. If you keep firing people that made mistakes, you're just pushing off and adding a new person who's going to make a new level of mistakes. So we really like to retain our staff and train and train and train. And once people understand what that goal is, what we're trying to do, if they understand that vision, everybody works towards the vision. And in Portland, we don't have that vision right now. Right? That's why I think this form of government is going to be really good because you're going to bring somebody in as mayor who's going to set the tone of the city. What's our vision? You talked about high speed rail. That's where we want to be.
Hmm.
It's where we're going to go because we want to have the most transformative transportation system. Because if you can have a transportation system where you don't have to own a car, everybody can prosper, whether you're poor or
Yes,
rich,
that's right.
right? We should not have to have owning a car as the requirement for you to prosper in Portland. We don't get me wrong, we're always going to have cars, but we need to allow everybody in Portland to have an equitable opportunity to succeed in our city, but we got to get through this melee this next year. We got to
Hmm.
take the biggest challenge and take it head on. And that's what I'm going to do.
Hmm. And just sorry to I just love business stuff. So you've been doing this Titan thing for how long now?
2.5 decades.
Okay.
Been running it as a CEO.
And currently, like, I always love I don't know if you know what I'm talking about on LinkedIn, the little employee, the staff size. How many people are
84.
80? Okay. So it's around 100
It's a
people. Yeah,
mid-size.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Give
it's
or
a good
take.
sized
We're in a
company.
freight recession right now. We'd like to be at 100, but
Sure.
that's just the whole COVID thing has made us go
Right,
Yeah,
through
right.
this
that's
crazy
right.
roller coaster
Yeah.
ride.
No, I was
Yeah.
just curious. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Is there anything else you guys want to talk about before I can move on to these goofy questions? Anything?
Thank you, Keith. That was
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
And thank you for
I
this
really
long form.
appreciate it.
Andy, I applaud you for this format.
Yeah, thank you,
It's
Andy.
always about soundbite, and this is really a nice way to have a conversation. And
Yeah.
I hope your viewers, I hope people look at it because they really need to see that you have to have a nuanced approach to running the city.
Yes.
You can't have just one guy with one item. They have to have a full list of a resume. So,
Yeah.
and Kristen, I owe you. I just, it's such a small city, and
It's
when
such
you
a small
walked in the
city.
door, like Kristen, you helped me open a day shelter, and you didn't even know it. But that's how you can take the genesis of our city and care for our city.
Thank
So
you.
okay,
Yeah.
so it's quick. It's
These are just rapid fire. Let's say you're parking like you did here out here today, and there's two white painted lines. Do you back in? Do you pull into that spot?
back in.
Okay, you got a
I got
fellow
a
back in,
backer.
or yeah.
Yeah, I do the
Do you have
same.
a reason why, or it's just you like to get out
Well,
fast?
every time it seems like I pull in, I'll make a mistake, and then I have to
That
move a
too.
whole bunch of different times.
Okay.
So I think it's just habit. And
And this is from a freight trucking company
oh,
owner, so
so
I'm
you'll like this. So my kids, they just laugh at me. So when they're in the car and my wife, I say, you never always got to be ready for an earthquake.
so you're prepared, yeah,
Be
to take
prepared.
off,
I don't
yeah,
know.
Yeah, now we can just
It's
go
just
straight.
kind of exactly like I just
Sure.
turn. Yeah,
yeah. I like it. Which piece of fruit do you think you could throw the farthest if you just threw it across a
just
football
chuck it.
field?
Let's grab a kiwi, right? Nice little
Kiwi? Okay,
palm,
That's
okay,
dense
no,
yeah,
you
thing.
said
yeah.
that,
Just
right?
whip
That's a good
that
answer.
thing.
I don't think anyone actually has
That's a
Yeah,
said
it's
pretty
that.
because
good answer.
if you use like an orange or a grapefruit, it's too big, right?
Yeah.
But if you use something too small like a cherry, there's not gonna. But
No.
Yeah.
let's go for kiwi.
I like the kiwi.
All
Okay.
right.
And actually, my guest yesterday was saying, like, I don't know if I'll do this, but he's like, you should start recording videos of this and do it and like show it on the show. I'm
That
like,
would
I
be
don't know if I'll
funny.
do that, but I don't have the actual answer to what goes the farthest. But
We're gonna check it out.
Yeah.
I like
No,
it.
that would be funny. So is the idea that you would, I just want to explore this briefly, no pressure,
I
but it would be fun to watch. Like, is the idea that you would like take them to your yard or something and hand them the fruit they
or you could
pick?
do
I
it
mean, you'd have
on
to be
his
ready to
own.
go.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
just
they'd have to bring it with them.
yeah.
And
No, I'm
then
saying
you
like
measure how far, I
yeah,
mean,
I wouldn't even have to be there. I'm just saying if Keith wanted to do it on his own, or if I did it and just recorded a video of me doing it and then showing it while we're talking
okay,
about
here's
it.
the other thing though. There's going to be a variable in regard to who's throw. It's got to be the same person every time where you have no
Well, and
control. Like Aaron Schmaltz is going to throw it a lot farther than I
yes,
am.
and weather and all that stuff and wind and
Yes, well, I
everything.
guess
All right,
so.
so we'll have to get like a
I don't know.
slingshot, like a relative constant thing, a
Yeah,
You'd need a
slingshot pulled
sidekick who
back
does
10
it every
inches
time,
and
or a
see what it
slingshot.
yeah.
does.
That's right,
Yeah.
something
I
mechanical.
like the
But
kiwi
I want to
though.
be a part of that.
Yeah, that would be fun. I like
Yeah.
the kiwi too.
Yeah. All right. As far as peanut butter, do you go crunchy, smooth? You like stir, no
Smooth.
stir?
I think I'll go smooth on that.
Okay.
Yeah, here's why. So when you're getting a piece of toast and you put the butter on and it melts, and then you put that peanut butter on, it just melts.
I love toast like
I
that
just
too.
I just love that sort of
Butter
That
and peanut
combo.
smooth
butter, so
where it's
good.
really melted and it just melts in
Yes.
your mouth. So I think
Okay.
it's there's a reason why. And that's probably way too much information for
No,
a
I
simple
love it.
question,
No,
right?
it's fine because you haven't even answered. What about the stir, no stir? Do you like the
Oh,
oil? You know the
oh, have to stir that.
You
okay.
do?
Oh, absolutely. Really?
People are
People
very
don't?
decisive about yeah.
You're
I buy
right. It
it.
I
comes
like
with
the
that.
no stir.
Yeah, I buy
Oh
it
no, actually I
integrated.
get my forearm
There you go. There you go. Yeah,
exercise
yeah.
doing that,
Do you
right?
spill doing it?
I do, and it gets really kind of. I agree. I don't like that
I
part because
don't
it
like
will
that.
bleed over. So you always have to then grab a paper towel.
But it
So
never, here's, you just can't, this is my pet peeve. That, and I'm sort of OCD about some of these things, and this is just I know this is my tick, but once it's bled over, the jar is gone as far as I'm
oh,
concerned
is that
because
right?
it's
No,
not an
I'll
aesthetically
wipe it
pleasing.
off
I
and
wipe it off too,
yeah.
but the oil
You keep
doesn't
I,
seem to go away.
do you
And
keep it in the
I,
fridge?
yes, it's pervade. It really.
even
Yeah,
if I
You
keep mine
do?
in the
I do.
fridge,
Okay.
it
Do you
doesn't melt.
not?
I don't know. I never even heard of that until one of my
Well,
guests
have
told
you
me
ever
that.
watched Ted Lasso?
Yeah,
I have
Do you
not. I've
like
heard
how
of
he
it. I know.
keeps the peanut butter on the counter? And
that's how I
so
grew up.
everybody just needs a finger, and he just
Put it in
oh,
there.
don't do that.
Well, no, of
Yeah.
course not.
I don't do that, but I was talking about this with my guest yesterday. I do scoop it out straight out sometimes and just because
I
I
do
live by myself.
too.
I don't
I
have,
do too.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure I would do that
Um,
too.
So
I
good.
was gonna say too. I mentioned this yesterday. I tried this thing called PB Fit. If you ever heard of that, it's like
Mm-mm.
powder peanut butter, and you put
Sounds
water in it.
disgusting.
And it sounds disgusting, but I did try it, and I'm on a mission to try every peanut butter on the
Is it
planet, and
good?
it was a
Wow.
pretty good. It tastes like the inside of a Reese's, like that.
Does it have sugar in it?
I don't know
Oh,
what
it
it was.
does.
My
Of course
Oh,
it does. That's
my
why
yeah.
it was
coworker
so
brought
good.
it in for me because
Huh.
knows that I'm into that. But
PB Fit?
PB, I think that's what it's called.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay, I'm gonna look into
You'll
this.
be ready for that trip to Mars then, won't you?
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
is it
My
Maury's?
dehydrated
All your
foods.
MREs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, do you have a favorite kind of French fry? Do you like straight crinkle cut,
Oh,
waffle fry,
you know,
tater tot?
let's just go rebel. Let's go curly cut, right?
Curly. I love curly.
Yeah,
That's
you
my favorite.
go
Yeah.
and that's like an Arby's, right?
Yep.
Oh,
Used to be
I
Jack in the Box,
now
yeah.
I probably will never have any ever again in my life,
Okay.
right? But if I had a choice, I'd probably go for that.
Okay. I like it. You've already answered this, right? Have you?
I like McDonald's fries. I like the
Okay. They're
classic.
classic. Yeah. Let's say you're getting ice cream from Salt and Straw. You go regular cup, waffle cone, or regular cone.
Cup probably, but my desire would be waffle cone.
Why
Okay.
cup?
Oh,
Because of
I'm a
calories or
healthy guy.
whatever?
Exactly. You know,
Oh,
it's like
you're such a bummer.
I work out a lot
Why
and
do
I
the
eat
ice
well.
cream then?
Well, you're right.
If you're gonna do it, do it.
I get the
I
cup
don't do it a
because I don't
lot,
like the
but
dripping.
I know, but you don't eat it fast
I
enough.
don't eat it fast
Get a
enough.
kid's scoop. Get a kid size scoop, and you'll
Yeah,
be able to enjoy
I've
that
done
waffle
that. You
cone.
get the little tiny scoop.
Yeah.
You keep the butter out,
I'm a
or do you
bad
keep it in the
influence.
fridge?
out.
Okay.
Do you
Yeah,
really?
I do.
And you don't
I
feel like
love that.
it develops a taste of the atmosphere
You just
indoors or
need
I
anything?
like
the
that
tin thing.
smooth, easy to cut
I do
through
too, but it's
butter, put onto
something
the toast.
it tastes
What is that called? A butter cozy? You need that thing.
it's still I
Yeah,
grew
I
up
do
with
have
that
it
and
in a butter
it's
cup.
never not
Interesting.
That thing.
tasted rancid to me since I started putting it in the
Okay.
refrigerator. And I again, that must just be my tick, but I that is the best. So I grew up on that toast combination, like
Yeah.
butter and peanut butter,
Yep.
and our family kept yes, we didn't refrigerate anything. I mean, the butter was out, the peanut butter was out, and it was so flipping delicious
Oh
because you're
yeah.
right. It's all ready to go.
Well,
None of it's cold.
it's funny you talk about that. When there were seven of us living in that house, I mean, it was a scrap
Yeah.
because
Oh,
there
it
was
would be.
seven of us. So nothing, we kept everything out because
Sure.
it was, I mean, it just,
Well,
we
it's
went through
always being
inventory.
used.
So
Yeah.
yeah. Yep.
I only got three more. This one's kind of new. If you had, you kind of already do run a brand, so but if you had to pick a gigantic brand to run, if you're forced to, in a company like
Hmm.
Amazon or Nike or something, is there a brand that you would want to run?
All right. Uh, Company that I'd like to run brand. I tell you my life dream. I'm gonna take a right turn on you. So my goal, my job I'd love is the United Nations Secretary,
Hmm.
Okay.
right? To me, wouldn't that be cool? Right? So a brand I'd like to run. What brand do I really like? And I love transportation brands. I mean, when you look at UPS and FedEx, I just admire them so much.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I've competed against them so long, and I know how hard it is. So that's kind of that clinical. But what sort of fun brand? Let's Ray-Ban classic brand. And
I have a
you get to
pair
go
of
to all
Ray-Bans.
those
Yeah.
cool events that they go to, concerts and everything. So I
Okay.
mean, it's a great lifestyle brand. I like that. I could keep going, by the way.
Okay. Yeah.
That's a
What
cool
about you?
answer.
I've never asked you this.
I don't know. I've never thought about it. What is your answer? Because
I
obviously
haven't
you've
thought
thought
about it.
about it. Really?
I don't know.
It
There's a
would be
lot
a
I would like to
sneaker
run.
company, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's kind of not the. It's hard to make profit as not. It's not as easy as it used to be. But
Well, Kanye West begs to differ, but I
yeah,
mean, he made Adidas more
I
than
could
you've ever
explain
made.
all that controversy going on
That is crazy
about
too.
how people. I don't know.
Right? I mean,
There's all
wasn't
this
that wild
Yeezy
though?
controversy now, but
I know, but that was so wild how much money they
oh my
made
god,
off
it
him.
blew Adidas up. Yeah, it did
Yes, it
for a long
did.
Yeah.
time, and I worked for them while it was going on, and
Wow, really? I didn't know that.
I was working at an agency in town, and we did a lot of video work when Adidas had all
Okay.
this money.
Huh. Easy money.
I don't know what I would. Yeah, I would. I mean, a lot of people come in here and said Amazon. That's an easy answer. I use Amazon a lot,
I
but
love
that's just
Amazon.
it
I
easy.
wouldn't want to run it. I feel like I mean, I wouldn't want to screw around with it.
Yeah,
I might screw it up.
yeah.
But it's an extraordinary brand.
Yes, it
They are
is.
so innovative. The things that they do so quickly,
Yeah.
their culture,
Hmm.
uh, they're hard on people though.
Yeah,
Their culture
yeah,
is really
yeah.
really hard on people, but the outcome is really amazing. They've transformed our entire
Everything.
society.
Yeah,
So while we can have some misgivings about how they did it, you still have to just be in awe of how they've achieved it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Of
Yeah.
Especially
course.
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
from
I don't
where
have misgivings about I mean,
Yeah.
I know there's all this social stuff about
Yeah.
I don't care. I don't want to hear it. I use them. They have changed my life. They've revolutionized my life. I'm not going to stop using
Yeah.
Amazon.
well, especially if I remember when they were just selling books back in the day. It's just like
Yeah.
I know.
quite the
And I
jump.
use them then. You know what,
Yeah.
Andy? I would pick like a network media company. That's what
Oh
I would
yeah,
pick
yeah,
because I think they are not doing well.
yeah.
Or
I
a
might do that too.
newspaper
Yeah, yeah.
or yeah, because
I
I
wouldn't
mean
pick
none of them are
newspaper, but
doing well and I
Yeah.
just don't
It's a
think
hard
it's
job.
yeah,
I
no.
think it's hard because they make it hard. I
I
think they don't think outside the box.
I
They're
would agree
not
that I would
innovating.
appreciate the challenge of that. Yeah, for
Yeah, I
sure.
think it would be yes, it would be a challenge, but also I think it takes stepping outside of just doing the same thing over and over. We know it's not working. And so everybody's leaving those network and legacy and whatever media companies in droves. And all these other things are popping up. And these old ones just can't seem to break out of
Mhm.
whatever shell they've put themselves in. And I think I think I could actually do something about that. But I wouldn't want to screw on somebody I already like Amazon or anything that's successful because I'd be afraid I'd screw it up.
Okay, all right.
That was
Do,
long-winded.
no, I like it. Do you have a? Did you have a? I always ask people, did you have a good meal recently, like a local business you want to shout out, or it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be a restaurant, but
Here's the thing. I think I appreciate efficiencies. I appreciate value and taste. So as far as it seemed, my wife and I have really gravitated to Matador lately.
Hmm.
okay,
It's
I like
easy.
Matador too.
We walk
It's
in,
good
it's
food.
it's casual, easy
Yeah.
dining. It's reasonably priced. The food's always
The
good.
service is good.
Yeah, they've been a night. They moved into my neighborhood, and surprisingly, I'm not a big Mexican restaurant guy. I like to go out to, a really nice fish house or something like that. But it has, I think they've done great. So
okay,
yeah,
nice.
several. I feel
Yeah.
like an ad for it now.
No, yeah. What about you? Do you have anything you want to shout out before
You know what? I went to the barbecue place that
the North Portland
the
or?
architect
Oh yeah, he
told
was
us
talking about that.
about.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
There you go.
I need to find it.
I can't remember. Yeah, I cannot remember the name.
But it was I will say it was
Oh,
delicious.
gotta love barbecue
Yeah.
places.
Um,
Matt's.
it's just
Matt's
called Matt's
Barbecue.
Barbecue.
Yeah, I had to
Okay.
look it up. But it was he was right. It is Texas style
Okay.
barbecue
Okay.
and
Mm, there you go.
they do it the right way.
I'll have
There
to
you
check it
go.
out.
You
Yeah.
can't go wrong when it comes to barbecue.
Oh,
There's
we
places.
went nuts.
Have you ever
Yeah.
been to Reverend's over there off in
Yes.
Milwaukee?
This was I mean, I
Better?
like it.
Really?
This was on a different plane.
Is
This
that
was like
right?
I did feel like I was in Texas. It was that good
All
when
right.
I
Well,
was eating it.
so
And
let's go have lunch.
I
Yeah, we
mean,
should.
it's amazing.
All right. I just want to give you a chance to. Where can people go if they like what you're saying to donate? You go to your website, your
Yeah.
socials, all that
Yeah.
stuff.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Kristen. KeithWilsonForMayor.com.
Yeah.
You'll find my priorities really listed out, and then reach out to me if you have questions. My campaign manager is Christopher Taft. We're really inviting people to invite me to house parties or any events. And so I'm really interested in hearing from our community and listening to them. And then I always like to say, and I always want to end with, real changes on the ballot this year. If we continue to elect
I
the
agree.
same people over and over again with same failed
Mhm.
ideas, with the same failed leadership, we cannot have a different outcome in our city. And so I'm asking, we have 7 months before the election, and I'm asking everybody, challenge the candidates that are running. If they can't articulate exactly what they're going to do next year, the costs associated with doing it, and the time frame that they're going to do to it to care for our neighbors, then you really owe it to yourself to not vote for them. We can't do the same things over and over again. I hear a lot about, well, you struggle with name recognition. Yes, but I know, and I've worked with almost all of the elected officials in our county and in the state. I may not have the grassroots name recognition, but I know how to run an enterprise. I know how to run a complex operation. Not only do I know how to run it, but I've ran it at such a high level that we're the peer outperform in the nation. And I expect to do that for our city as well. And so I want everybody to challenge all the candidates. What do you want your Portland to look like in the near term? And then make sure that they have the skill, the vision, and they're communicating that and they're articulating. If they're not, then open your mind. We can have a different outcome. And I'm asking as an outsider that I really think that it's um, our opportunity to change the direction of our city. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to leave nobody behind.
Yeah, and I appreciate you, like, the stuff you just said. I think you did bring some of that today,
Yeah, thank
numbers
you.
and your plan and
Hmm.
stuff. So thanks for doing that. And I will donate to you. I donate to anyone who comes on the show. It's not necessarily an endorsement, but I will send you a donation because you
That's
came and
great.
shared your
Yeah,
time with
thank
us
you for
today.
that.
Yeah, thanks so much. This has been really a
You know,
good
and that's
conversation.
nice. I
That's a
as a
great
candidate,
idea.
I should
Yeah,
always ask for donations. I want to impress upon you that, a candidacy is always fueled with donations
sure.
because it's the way I'm going to be able to build and buy a media campaign. Andy, you and I are both in
Oh yeah,
media. We
Mm,
recognize that without conveying our message well, even though it might be the best message, the message dies if it's unable to
yeah,
be
yeah,
delivered.
yeah,
And so I say donations are critical, and then word of mouth. Let's
yeah.
yeah, we have
And
a
I was gonna mention too. You're saying your name. How well known your name is, but a bunch of people have brought up your name. That's why I
wonderful.
wanted you to have on here, and I was like, I've never heard of this guy, but all these other people have heard of him. So
I've been doing the work for years.
yeah,
And if you've been in these environments, if you've been in homeless service providers or in state government or the bills that I've passed, I've been doing the work. I'm not a
hmm
person who's just coming to the party trying to be an interloper. Um, I
yeah,
feel like I'm the right person at the right time with the right challenges, pardon me, with the challenges that we face in Portland.
excellent. Well, yeah, thanks so much, Keith, for
Thank
coming in
you,
today.
Andy.
Yeah,
Kristen,
good to
what
see
a
you again.
wonderful surprise to see you
Yeah.
show up. You and everybody. I mean, Kristen has done a lot of magic in this town. And Andy,
yeah.
your program here, great job. Your
Thanks,
format is brilliant.
thanks.
It
Yeah,
is brilliant.
I'll keep
Yep,
doing it as long as I can. So yeah.
right on.